Welcome, everyone, to episode 166 of the Warhammer 40,000 podcast, known across the internet as Lookout Sir. My name's Dan, and it's that bit at the beginning of the show where I'm going to apologise for this terrible display of awfulness, as poor old Phil has been wrestling with technical issues which have impacted our ability to create the usual sort of quality you might have come to expect from the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. But that doesn't change my opinion of Phil. It's not his fault that he's got dodgy technology. It's just a consequence of modern technology and his fear of robot overlords. Isn't that right, Phil?
Yes, that is exactly it. I've had mic issues. It's plagued us for the full 2 weeks that we've been trying to record this episode, which we'll go into a little bit more detail later on. I'm on a secondary crappy mic at the moment. Audio quality not as good as it normally is. I do apologise yet again. Sorry, Dan. Apologise to you, Mr. Boss. Hopefully it'll be sorted next episode. But that won't stop us having fun for at least this segment.
Exactly. We will do our very best to soldier on. And Phil, please stop apologising for it. I mean, to be honest with you, dear listener, you're going to hear a lot of that throughout the process. There's a lot of moments where we're just like, oh, core blimey, what a load of old fuss. But it's
because you make me, Dan. You make me say it every time.
This is it. But we're going to persevere, and we're going to do what, Phil? What are we talking about this time around?
I'm trying to recall. We pretty much just do Warhammer Day previews.
That is basically it, yeah. And we did a segment where we basically apologise a bit more and then try and talk about Space Marines and then just end up cobbling together a weird series of lists for a little short while.
Yes. And then obviously we did manage to do a bit of an outro as well where we talk about something, but it was so long ago now I can't actually remember. But, it's an outro. It's going to be mad.
Yeah, it's a muddly mess of a thing. This is why we always get such great 5-star reviews.
Hang on a second, what is this? Some kind of review? A 5-star review? Well, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this Warhammer 5-star review.
All right, Phil, this week's 5-star review comes from where?
It's not a guess, but it's a hope. It's audible.au because someone recently told us they left us a review there. So I'm hoping you're going to make their dream come true.
Well, that would mean that they would jump in the queue, Phil. This review comes from September of 2022 via Apple Podcasts of Germany. You can't have me prioritising Audible of Australia just because someone randomly decided to put a Audible review.
Here's the thing. If they're the first person to leave a review in Audible Australia, then they're not skipping the queue. They're at the front of the queue for their location.
They are. But, we are dealing with a serious backlog here at the moment in terms of at least the time people left these glorious reviews. By the way, as well, actually, to 1986 JCB, I did notice that you left us a lovely comment on our YouTube channel in response to the fact that you're not dead. So that was nice.
That's good to know. Do
you remember that, Phil, how we made the faux pas where we started to concern ourselves with JCB's potential lifespan?
I think we did, yeah.
Yeah, that was a whole thing we did. But they told us in their YouTube comment that they're not dead. And I will respond, or Phil will respond. Phil, make a note. Respond to JCB in their YouTube comments. We've done a very poor job of maintaining that comment section this time around.
That's because that's your job. I
know, but that's why I'm asking you to do it. Because I'm what's the word? I'm
busy.
Yeah, I'm fobbing it off. That's it.
Yes, boss, I'll do it. Okay.
I'm making good by basically calling him out here and saying, yeah, sorry about that. Because, that's one of the things I suppose, need to do a better job of. I've definitely been slacking on that front. But yeah, no, Phil, this is Apple Podcasts of Germany.
Ooh.
We do well, Phil, in Germany.
In the Deutschlands.
To be fair, I think this might actually be one of the few Apple Podcasts of Germany reviews we've ever received. But I like to imagine that loads of our German listeners enjoy the show greatly. If I was to do a quick search on our podcasting platform, it would probably tell me that we get a few listeners out there. So I feel utterly obliged in asserting that we do well there in Germany, right, Phil?
I mean, one would hope. Yes.
Absolutely. Anyway, if you would like to be like, hang on, I've got to now try and pronounce this name. Ugrivous? Ugrivous. That's what I'm going with. Does that make sense to you, Phil?
Not in the slightest, but I can't see how it's spelled, so it's fine.
It's spelled Ugrivous.
Yeah, my mental image to be able to produce that in my head is impossible, so I can't actually tell what it will be like.
Well, yeah. Oh, actually, it when I typed it in, they suggest, are you meaning to spell grievous as in like General Grievous?
So you thinking that's how it's pronounced?
I'm going with it. We're going with Ugrivous. That's what we're going to say from here on in. Ugrivous. Something like that. Anyway, the point is, if you would like to be like this individual and have your online identity poorly pronounced by a silly dyslexic, you need only leave us a 5-star review in the places where you can do so, such as Apple Podcasts of Germany or Audible of Australia. All of these options are available to you. Please do leave us a 5-star review. It means the world to us, and we're obviously incredibly grateful for all of you that have given us 5-star reviews, both in the past and in the present and in the time to come. We will do our utmost best to ensure that we will read out and celebrate all 5-star reviews, for as the promise has been stated, this podcast will never end as long as there are 5-star reviews to be spoken of. Right, Phil?
That is contractually obliged. We made a blood pact in the pale moonlights. That is what we're doing, yes.
Absolutely. Equally, you might consider, and we hope you would consider becoming one of our patrons. We obviously really, really appreciate the support that they give us. They will potentially be instrumental in helping us deal with the audio issues that are causing Phil many problems at the moment, because with their support, Phil might end up buying a new microphone. Isn't that right, Phil?
That might be the last resort that we'll be doing. But yes, that will be greatly appreciated. So thank you in advance, everyone that has contributed to potentially a new mic for your listening audio pleasure next episode.
There you go. Thank you all. And then there is merchandise. So just check the links in the description. Christmas is coming around the corner. So if you want to befuddle... exactly. Buy your gran a lovely Lookout Sir item. They do mugs, I believe, don't they? Doesn't old Lee do the mugs?
He does mugs, but we don't. I mentioned that to you just off the cuff that we should dabble in mugs. So maybe...
we should totally dabble in mugs. Can we get a Christmas range of mugs made, Phil?
Yes. It needs to say something witty, though. Christmassy, but Warhammer-y. If people have suggestions...
Merry Christmas, War. There you go. That'll do. Phone it in. Or we could try and sort of like do some kind of like Got Milk style campaign where it's like a really underwhelming kind of, statement of itself, where it's like, I don't know, Agrax, Earthshade, Aware? I don't know. Something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, yes, you can tell why our merchandise is a hot seller. Anyway, let's get on to this review and let's get this episode done, because Lord knows I'm sick to death of it at this point. Not really.
You love it, really.
It's just been a troubling week. It's been a trying time. Fantastic 5 stars. I absolutely loved the episode about Warhammer Plus, especially the part, did you like the shows? Yes, all of them. The confusion and the flabbergastery expression was perfection. So if you remember, Phil, this is in reference to that time where we took a bit of a poo-poo on the overarching quality of Warhammer Plus. And, off the back of that, I at least stopped being a Warhammer Plus subscriber. You held on in there for another year. but then ultimately have now since given up, or at least I think you have.
No, I did. Yeah, I unsubscribed just prior to my new subscription going, so I haven't got the new Mini. I haven't watched Prior Nexus, which is, would be nice to, but I'll hold out for another time, I think, for that.
There you go. But with all that said, obviously, thank you so much, ugrivous. You are an absolute saint and a scholar. We really appreciate your 5-star review. It means an awful lot to us, and I'm glad that you are enjoying the show, or at least you appear to be, by account of the words that you've put on the internet. And to expand on that, here's Phil.
Well, thank you, ugrivous, however your name is actually pronounced. We appreciate your comment and kind words. Glad you enjoyed the episode, even though it was some time ago. So hopefully you too, like JCB, is still alive. We do appreciate it. Obviously, reach out, let us know, just to, make sure that you are. Thank you very much for your kind words.
I love the idea that we have become consistently concerned by the ongoing existence of those who left reviews from a year ago. But it's an important thing to, consider. Ultimately, we hope we all enjoy long, prosperous lives. And what better way to spend that time than this episode of Look Out, Sir. Transitional noise. All right, everyone, in this part of the pod, we're going to apologise because ultimately everything went wrong for us this time around. Phil has been unable to secure the Space Marine Codex despite purchasing it in ample time from Element Games. What went wrong there, Phil?
Well, Element Games have posted it. It's stuck in a postal depot in Swindon, along with some extra things that I bought for myself pretty much the day after, I think it was, or a couple of days afterwards, which was some Annihilators for AOS for my Thunder Warriors and the Dawnbringer Book 2. So all of those things, including the Space Marine Codex, is just, waiting to be delivered, even though it's meant to be like 24-hour Royal Mail. So boo-hoo, Royal Mail. It's all your fault, basically.
Boo hiss, Royal Mail, boo-hoo. But yeah, so Phil's not been able to get hold of the book. And also, throughout this episode, depends obviously on how much I kind of edited out. We've just been riddled with technical problems. So Phil's mic, for some reason, we presume it's his mic because basically when he tries to use his microphone, things start to go wrong. He's currently using just a pair of headphones. That's been essentially the workaround. But yeah, we don't know the extent of the problem, but it has been a problem, hasn't it, Phil? And it has impacted our ability to record this time around.
It's been a bit of a nightmare. We've probably done twice as many recording sessions as we normally do, and because we got half the output, basically, because we had to keep stopping, had to keep rebooting, had to keep trying different methods to make my mic work, and it just wasn't working, basically. Unfortunately, it seems to get a good 5-10 minutes in, and then it goes wrong, and then we got to reset and try again. So hopefully by the next episode, I would have either fixed it or just bought a new mic, which might be the solution at this point in time.
Yeah, we're looking into those options. But all of those things being equal, we've essentially arrived at the fact that we are going to struggle to, we're just not going to be able to meaningfully review the Space Marine book this episode because Phil hasn't got it, and ultimately time just isn't on our side. And we want to make sure that we put something out, and this is basically, this episode now is basically what we could scramble together from that. But what we wanted to do is do a bit of a kind of first initial thoughts on Space Marines, and then we'll kind of deliver the goods on that. Because obviously where Phil has not been able to access Codex Space Marines, I've been reading it quite extensively and getting into the weeds with it, and spending a lot of time kind of coming up with army lists and looking at all the different rules and all of that kind of stuff. So I just thought we'd just do a quick kind of like initial summary and then ultimately chuck in this apology and get you next time, as it were. So I'm
sorry, everyone. It's all my fault.
It's not all your fault, Phil. It's not.
He's flawless in this time round. It's not his fault. It's all mine.
It's like you're saying that as a sort of like you think I was digging at you when doing my bit of it. Did I come across like I was just burying you there?
No, it's fine. I have flogged myself sufficiently the standard 20 times each time something goes wrong. I'm suitably punished.
Absolutely, appropriately so for sure. I think look, it's just a shame, right? And it's never easy putting out these shows on a regular basis, and we had contemplated, we'll just call it like episode 165.5 or whatever, and in the end, we've just ended up calling it 166 because, I mean, to be honest with you, even with its kind of shortened format and dodgy kind of recording processes, I think we're probably still putting out a longer podcast than many of our peers would put out on a semi-regular basis. So, often I feel like we're always being a little bit too hard on ourselves, but we do obviously hold ourselves to a certain standard when it comes to kind of delivering on the air quotation marks promise of this podcast, which is that we try and give you guys a lengthy, podcast that you can use while you're traveling or while you're painting, more particularly, or hobby in the general sense. We want to be there with you on your, many moments where you're, wrestling with miniatures or various motorways and or A roads around the world, I suppose.
Yes, no, that all makes sense.
Exactly. But anyway, look, let me do a really quick vibe on Space Marines. I mean, Phil, have you got an initial hot take on Space Marines? Space Marines are out now, Phil. Does it matter?
Well, I got the general impression that they're pretty much the same as the indexes in terms of data sheets haven't changed a wild amount. There might be some issues with compatibility of some stuff, and obviously there's detachments, but I really don't know anything about them yet.
Yeah, so the detachments are very much themed around the established chapters, right? So there's one that is clearly intended to be the Iron Hands one, and there's one that's intended to be the White Scars one. And they play into different archetypes, and ultimately what they're doing with these, much like they did with the Tyranid book, is they're essentially making it that you're kind of heavily incentivized to use certain types of units, but you're not being essentially told that you have to use those sorts of units. So certain units become optimal or more useful, and other units just kind of remain the same. What's kind of weird about it is that a lot of the time it's not immediately obvious just by reading the actual kind of like army rule or the detachment rule. Sometimes the detachment rule is seemingly quite generic or underwhelming. It's only when you actually start looking at the enhancements and the stratagems that it becomes obvious what you're trying to achieve. But yeah, like I think overall, I quite like the way the detachments work, to be honest with you. And I quite like the way the Marine decks has kind of come together. I think there's a lot of like creative opportunities in it. Obviously, we've seen with it that they have really trimmed off some of the fat. So there are some weird examples in it still. So the quick hot take is that, they've now got one captain profile for a captain in power armor. And then they've got a captain in Gravis armor, and then they've got a captain in Phobos armor, and then they've got a captain in Terminator armor. But those are 4 entries for 4 different types of captains in different suits of armor. And that is the same trend pretty much with all, HQ or character types. You've got Chaplain in power armor, Chaplain in Terminator armor. I think that's actually it for the Chaplain. Oh, then Chaplain on bike. Terminator, librarian in Phobos armor, librarian in power armor. Those variables exist, but then for some mad reason, they got 3 different types of lieutenant in Phobos armor, which is like, right, okay, like why? It's just sort of like, it's like in every other instance they've gone, if it's a thing in a thing, it's one thing, but for whatever reason, the lieutenant in Phobos armor gets 3 data sheets.
Yeah, because there's the new Leviathan one, and then there was one that was like a Reaver, and then there was one that was more like the what they called the standard like tactical infiltrators. Is that right? Incursors.
Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
yeah, it is interesting for sure, but it is weird. It's like, especially when they kind of go on to lengths to kind of streamline some, that those are still in there. But yeah, overall, I think, in terms of units, it's pretty reasonable now. I mean, Space Marines are still an insane range. Like, even when you take away various, firstborn things and you kill off lots of other units.
And my baby contemptors gone.
Oh, they're all gone now. Well, no, that's not true now, because they now just have a generic profile called Dreadnought, and your Contemptor can basically be a Dreadnought. It's just what they've done now is they've got rid of Venerables, Ironclads, and Contemptors. They've all gone. It's just Dreadnought. But the Dreadnought profile is such that you could totally rep a Contemptor Dreadnought with that profile. It just isn't quite as cool as what you had in the initial.
True. Quick question. Do they still have Relic Terminators? Because they became Horus Heresy units with the Tartarus and Cataphracti.
I don't believe they do, but I'm just checking now. Let's have a quick gander. We have no. You have a Terminator Assault Squad and a Terminator Squad. That's it.
Oh, okay. So I guess you could just run them as the regular Terminators now. So it is interesting that they've streamlined it quite a bit.
Yeah, they've tried to, for sure. There's still 3 different types of gladiators, 3 different types of storm speeders, 2 different types of predator, 3 different types of land raider, etc. There's still that kind of granularity in it. They haven't just gone, this is the land raider, kit it out how you want. So there is still those.
Have they got the chapter specific characters all in there as well?
Yeah, so this book contains all chapter-specific characters. Again, in terms of characters that have been kind of wiped out, as far as I can tell, from the generic Space Marine side of things, none of the generic characters have bit the bullet yet, except for some of the Ultramarines ones. So we already knew about Chaplain Cassius. He's gone, as has Sergeant Kronos, but they've kept a few of those. So Sergeant Kronos is no more, as is Chaplain Cassius. So they're the ones that went from the Ultramarines, and then, as far as I can tell, none of the other ones have gone. So you still got Lysander, you still got Cantor, or Pedro Cantor, you've still got Vulcan Heston. Obviously, characters like Shrike got upgraded to a Primaris Chapter Master, so he has moved on. I think all of the old, the limited range of other characters is still supported. But, obviously, Forge World ones and things have all been kicked to the sidelines. But yeah, they've streamlined the book quite nicely, and they've added in some new units. There is some madness in it. So off the bat, I assume at some point they're going to adjust this. But that new command squad, Phil, flipping hell. It's one of those ones where you look at it and you're like, I'm sorry, what? Why? What? Why?
Because didn't you say it was 70 points or something?
Yeah, so the company heroes is 95 points, sorry. And that contains basically 2 veterans, which are basically lieutenants, right? One's got a master-crafted bolt rifle and one's got a master-crafted heavy bolter. And the master-crafted heavy bolter is hilarious because it's a sustained hits 2 damage-free heavy bolter. It's pretty tasty. And then, they've got the ancient and they've got the champion. But they're 4 wounds each, Phil. 4 wounds each for 95 points. And
what are they taking in their breakfast to get that?
Well, that's it, man. Well, I think the idea is that they're all basically lieutenants now. So it's a unit of, because I guess Space Marine Ancients, if you take an ancient that isn't in a command squad, that ancient is, 4 wounds. So I think what's happened here is they've just gone, basically the squad is the equivalent of 2 lieutenants, 1 ancient and 1 company champion, and that they always had 4 wounds, or they did have 4 wounds from the start. 10,
But
so we're just
how much
keeping
does a
that
regular lieutenant cost?
Regular lieutenant is about 65 points for a lieutenant. Yeah, lieutenant 65 points.
And this was how many points again?
95 for 4 of them.
Wow, that's bonkers.
It is mad. It is mad because the Mastercrafted Heavy Bolter is legit. The Mastercrafted Bolter is legit. The company champion isn't a slouch, and their innate ability is -1 to the wound roll. Sorry, or is it? Yeah, -1 to wound rolls.
That's pretty good.
It's huge, man. So the thing is like at the moment I've been mucking around with Ultramarine lists because that's kind of the flavour that I'm going for at the minute. And my Ultramarine list is the starting point was I'm going to take Marnius Calgar. So Marnius
Can he join them?
He joins them, yeah. So Marnius Calgar and his 2 lads, so his Victrix Honor Guard, join that squad, and then you add a lieutenant to it as well. Because the lieutenant allows you to fall back and charge, or fall back and shoot, which is pretty wild. So, yeah, like that squad to me just looks madness. I mean, thank God you can't put an apothecary in it, because God, if you could add an apothecary to it, it would have been utterly bananas. But like, yeah, man, like as a squad, like that company champion squad is looking really sweet, and it's gorgeous, man. I mean, I built the kit, love it. It's really nice. Even the champion, to his credit, when you see him in 3 dimensions, all right, not great. I mean, obviously,
that's cool.
Yeah, not as good as the limited
edition
one. Yeah, but yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, I ended up buying a couple of the heads, the bear heads, off of like eBay for conversion.
Oh, mate, you could have had all mine. I ain't put any bear heads on them.
It was some late night greedy purchasing. I was like, look at these guys and their grizzled faces. Right, I'll have that. Thank you very much. I guess the only downside is the 2 like what they call company champions, the guys with the bolter and the heavy bolter.
No, I don't think so.
No, sorry, I mean that they've got like a fixed loadout. That's the only downside to them. Whereas before you could give them like shields and power weapons and stuff like that, and I was midway through converting some up to have that, so that will be a project that will be binned off for another time, I guess.
Yeah, I think the thing that is still quite cool about all of that, though, is the fact that, like, I think as a unit it's quite interesting, but I think it actually becomes really interesting when you add someone like Calgar to it, because all of a sudden the unit feels really balanced at that point, because Calgar himself is okay at shooting. Because he's still got, obviously, the 2 gauntlets of Ultramar, and they're still quite reasonable from a shooting perspective. You combo that with the heavy bolter and the bolt rifle, it's quite useful, and then you add in the fact that you've got the 2 Victrix Honor Guard, and then obviously the champion as well, and then there's the banner bearer, the ancient, with a mastercrafted bolt gun as well. So those like guys in complete kind of force are just really awesome as a kind of collective. So digging that side of things, and then there's some other fun stuff. I wrote a list, Phil, with 9 dreadnoughts in it.
Nice.
So the list is, I don't mind saying, 3 Ballistus Dreadnoughts, 3 Brutalis Dreadnoughts, 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, Lionel Johnson or Roberte Gilliman, depending on which flavour you want to do, but one of the Primarchs, depending on which flavour you're looking for. At the moment, I'm leaning into Roberte Gilliman because of the Ultramarine stuff. So Roberte Gilliman and a Tech Marine with either a 20-point upgrade if it's Dark Angels, i.e. the Lion, or a 40-point upgrade if it is the Ultramarines. And you take them as the what's the name of the flipping company? The one that allows you to, basically the Iron Hands company. Iron Storm Spearhead. And then you get this 40-point upgrade that gives the vehicles within 6 of the Tech Marine lethal hits.
Wow.
Yeah, and now that obviously Oaths of Moment has changed to be reroll hits only, having lethal hits on things like Ballistus Dreadnoughts is quite handy, because you can obviously try and fish for 6s.
So I guess there's no way, because before you could have Iron Hands success chapter and turn a dreadnought into a character, so I assume there's no way to do that anymore.
No, there's no way to do that I'm aware of. And there are no character dreadnoughts anymore.
Well, there's one in Legends for Minotaurs.
Actually, there might be.
Cullen is Legends as well, I think.
Bjorn the Foul-Handed could still be a character.
He is. That is true. You're right.
Yeah,
so you could... Because you could ditch one of those characters because you still got Tech Marine, and then you could add in more of the generic dreadnoughts, I guess, to add even more dreadnoughts to your list. You've got to keep Richie proud as the current reigning champion of an all-dreadnought army.
That's true. I could go to 12 dreadnoughts, maybe. Well, maybe not 12, because the regular dreadnoughts, I think, are like 100. Oh, actually, if they're 120 points... Hang on now, Phil. Let's just look. Let's not dismiss the possibility. So a regular dreadnought is 135 points. So if I took, so that will be what 405 points, wouldn't it, for three of them? And so basically,
how much is the Lion?
The Lion is 380, and the Tech Marine is 55. So basically, you could take out the Tech Marine is 75 with the Lion. So if you took out the Lion and took the upgrade off of that, you'd be at 400. So you'd be off by 5 points.
You can still get 2 more.
You
could still get 2 dreadnoughts in.
You could do 2 dreadnoughts more. Yeah.
It's not bad.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. But yeah, anyway, long story short, it's quite interesting. Is the long and short of it? You could go super dreadnought spammy. Dreadnoughts now as well. 2 up armor saves on them. Oof.
Oh, really?
Well, on the ballistas
Redemptor.
and the Redemptor and stuff, they're all 2 up saves. Do regular dreadnoughts have 2 up saves? I will tell you just now. Yeah, they do. Sorry, regular dreadnoughts are 2 up saves as well.
Contemptors are back, baby.
Wow, that's it, mate. That's it. Yeah. What abilities does a regular dreadnought have? It's got Wisdom of the Ancients aura. While friendly adepters start as infantry units within 6 of this model, each time modeling that unit makes an attack, reroll hit rolls 1. So they're not particularly great if you're not got any infantry. But actually, to be fair, having reroll 1s to hit auras from dreadnoughts as a generic thing is pretty strong. I think it's all right.
Does that affect themselves then?
No, because they're not infantry.
Oh, it only affects infantry. Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of weapons, you can arm. So war gear options for a dreadnought is you can either have a plasma cannon, multi-melter, or twin las cannons, which is crazy, right? Oh no, and they come with an assault cannon. So they come with the assault cannon, but you can either have a plasma cannon, multi-melter, or twin las cannons, or you can have a missile launcher. And you can have 1 heavy flamer and 1 dreadnought close combat weapon, or you can have a storm bolter and a close combat weapon.
So you kind of can do a contemptor then.
Yeah, basically. You can still rep your contemptors as dreadnoughts. It's totally fair enough as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure as far as pretty much everyone's concerned. So, yeah, that's essentially the thing that reps for dreadnoughts now. Is dreadnoughts. So yeah, maybe there's something in it. Maybe there's a way that I could do 12 dreadnoughts. I just need to find a 50-point HQ, which is an ancient. I could just basically do 12 dreadnoughts and an ancient.
Yeah, because isn't it called March of the Ancients when you have all the dreadnoughts together? So it kind of works.
It does kind of work. The cheapest HQ choice you can do is a Blade Guard Ancient at 45 points or a regular Ancient at 50 points.
No, bargain. There you go.
I love the idea of that. Just one dude with the flag just being like, I'm in charge here!
I'd love to see that. Get paid
all these old crusty dreadnoughts being like, what the heck are you doing, mate? Hang on, I'm just going to check if that's legit, actually. I'm going to chop up this list quickly and take a quick goosey gander. So 1 ancient, and then where's the dreadnoughts got? There we go. 1, 2, 3. Bang on 2,000 points, mate. Boosh.
Meant to be.
12
with with an enhancement or not?
No. That ancient is just going Billy Basics at this point.
Basic.
There's no.
Yeah, brilliant.
What does this ancient even do? What's your ability, ancient? Banner. While this model is leading a unit, well, it won't be doing that. And then Unbreakable Duty. So annoying that it's that the Tech Marine's not 50 points because the Tech Marine would be great in that list, obviously. Because he gets.
I guess you could drop one dreadnought to fit him in.
Yeah, it's probably the right play. Well, what I would do, I'd drop one dreadnought and I'd get 3 of them, 3 Tech Marines.
Oh,
yeah, because then you could obviously. Well, what you could do is you could do 3 dreadnought, 3 Tech Marines and the Iron Hands.
Yes, the character version.
Yeah, because then the 4 of them. Hang on, Phil, you got me thinking here. Although now I've got to change it not into. Hang on, I'll just find out how many. Let's do it super quick. I'm sure everyone's loving this content. This is basically what we ended up with as in way of an apology. Is us crafting a terrible dreadnought list. Right, here we go. Boosh, Ironstorm, 2,000 points. Idea. Tick. Create army. All right, here we go. So characters. We will go with... Well, in fact, let me establish the baseline. Other detachments. Ballistic Dreadnought, 3 of them. Brutalis Dreadnought, 3 of them. Oh, sorry, not 4 of them, 3 of them. Dreadnought, 2 of those. And then Redemptor Dreadnought, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I need to delete one of my duplicate Brutalis. Delete that unit. And then what we're doing, I'm doing characters. So where are you? Old man Ferios. Here he is. I'm Father Ferios. I'm Father Ferios is ever so slightly too expensive.
How many points is he?
He is 95. Whereas the rest of so you can do 3 Tech Marines, 3 Ballistic Dreadnoughts, 3 Brutalis Dreadnoughts, 2 Dreadnoughts, 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts for 1,980 points.
Well, that's pretty good.
That is pretty good, to be fair. That is not something to stick one's nose up at.
Yeah.
So there you go.
A silly but fun list.
I mean, I'm all for it, mate. Like 40k to me right now is just, it's a beer and pretzels game now. It's like it's for the lulz, and I actually think an all dreadnought list like that would actually be pretty tasty. So I might well do it, mate.
I'll see it at RFW4 then.
Mate, in all seriousness, it's probable to be an army that I will do, and I'll be honest with you as well. I may have just bought 3 Ballistic Dreadnoughts off of eBay.
Ooh.
In pursuit of the all dreadnought list. Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
I want to take Richie's cake and eat it too.
Oh, you could have a dreadnought army off where you both fight against each other with your dreadnought armies.
Well, that could be pretty special. That would be a moment for all. But yeah, so the Marines seem interesting. We'll get into a deep dive with them next episode. And we'll also probably talk about... Well, we probably won't talk about the Meta Watch article that just came out because it's not even interesting today, so I don't think it's going to be interesting in 2 weeks, is it?
No, I mean, I've not read it, but I looked at the stats and, technically 40k seems a bit more balanced. So,
yeah, crikey. God, yeah, no, pat yourself on the back, people. You've done a great job. That was, not the best. But yeah, no, there we go. I reckon that'll probably do on that segment. So yeah, sorry guys. We hope you enjoy this whole kind of, mess of a thing. But we'll be back for episode 167, where we promise to deliver the usual standard of content. So say a prayer for Phil's microphone, and we will now transition to whatever it is we've been able to cobble together. Transitional noise. As you'll discover in our outro, Phil had technical issues, but hopefully he doesn't in this segment. But we don't know yet because we're just starting. But this is the part of the podcast where me and Phil talk about the Warhammer Day reveals. Exciting, isn't it, Phil?
It is indeed.
overall, Warhammer Day, an important part of any Warhammer enthusiast's calendar, an exciting time where we get to reflect on all the terrible mistakes we've made by purchasing endless amounts of this silly old rubbish, but also a time to get excited and reflect on the rubbish that we will acquire in the future. What a delight, eh, Phil?
Oh, exactly. And it was 40 years of Warhammer, no less. Specifically Warhammer Fantasy, really, which is the thing that kicked it off. So you would have thought there'd be a big celebration, extra special reveals for this one.
You would have thought so, although we may as well say it from the outset, because you probably know it already if you are a follower of Warhammer-related things. Bit of a disappointment if you were expecting anything spectacular, it's fair to say. Not that it was necessarily a bad set of reveals, it just didn't necessarily feel like it met the moment, I would say.
No, it was kind of just sort of standard sort of reveals. I guess there was a focus on the old world, which was maybe leaning towards a nod to the 40 years of Warhammer, but they didn't do anything really special in a way of like a calling out of the 40 years, it didn't seem.
No. And, I mean, just for the sake of saying it in this moment here, that that Leagues of Votan 40th anniversary mini is a big thumbs down for me. What a smelly poo that thing is.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It doesn't really feel like it sums up 40 years of Warhammer in any way, shape or form. It just feels like the generic store anniversary or Warhammer Day mini that they would do on any other year. And they just happen to be like, yay, 40 years. I mean, they could have done something really special. So I don't remember his actual name, but I think he's Harry the Hammer? The guy that was on the first two Warhammer Fantasy, but box art, I guess, because it was a box at the time. And he has been immortalised in a few miniatures over the years. They could have done a revamp of him. That would have been something kind of quite iconic, I think, and actually talk about the history of Warhammer Fantasy. So that would have been a nice, interesting nod. They could have done something like that. That's what I would have liked. But no, they just gave you a Votan model, which, yeah, I'm not a fan of. And I'll mention it now because they've also, since those reveals, released, what was it, the Scalvian Explorator for the Squat Prospectors for Necromunda, which is like this insane looking, amazing tank, and a couple of characters for Necromunda, Ash Waste in particular, for the Squat Prospectors. They look amazing. Like, absolutely love the aesthetic. I kind of wish this is what Votan was.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like the Squats are a really, really beautiful collection of incredible miniatures that channel all of the kind of aesthetics and kind of classic values of the historical Squat range brought to life in an interesting and compelling way through beautiful sculpts, interesting lore, and ultimately really kind of crazy design decisions that, you know, just creates a really vibrant and interesting range. Not to say that the Necromunda range gets everything right, because the Van Saar stuff that was also revealed alongside the Squats, in my opinion, isn't especially special. I think it's fine. I just think the problem is with the Van Saar at this point is they've just gone a little bit too sci-fi spectacular, as it were. It's very generic almost, even though I appreciate it's an absurdity to suggest that a bunch of mechanized kind of like arachnid-esque kind of multi-limbed robot battlesuit things with all their sci-fi tech and stuff is a bit generic. But it really is. It just doesn't really... When I look at the Van Saar, it just doesn't look appropriately 40k, in my opinion. It's a bit too sci-fi.
But yes, it's got a very sort of sleek, modern sci-fi look as opposed to grimdark 40k sci-fi.
All right, we fixed that, or at least we think we did. How you sounding, Phil? You there?
I am here, weirdly via a very different setup, but we think it, as you say, we think it will be working.
We'll find out. It ruined the intro, cost us a day, but we'll see how it gets on this occasion. I remain hopeful. Anyway, yeah. So the Vansar, I don't want to say I dislike the Vansar. They're just not quite doing it for me. They're not quite 40k enough, in my opinion.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, that is totes fair. But again, just to say, the squats, my goodness, not least the rather large new contraption that they travel around in, but the characters themselves. I mean, I love the little, Robot Wars-esque little helper they've got. That's really good.
Oh, see, I was thinking that was more like Star Wars Battlefront 2. There was a character that had a little droid that went on her back. And then obviously the new Star Wars games has a little robot helper that plugs into their back as well.
That is also true. But nonetheless...
Because I'm talking about the second character, although you might be talking about the first character, which has got like the little wheeled robot.
That's right. Yeah, no, that was the one I was going for. Has an aesthetic not too dissimilar to one of the more vicious characters from Jason the Wheeled Warriors, but it is a very tenuous link. A very tenuous link. But yeah, they're beautiful. I mean, those squat minis for Necromunda, if you are a Leagues of Votan player, do yourself a favour and get some squat minis in that range, because you will appreciate the finer things when you add those to your collection.
I think you could turn that vehicle, I don't want to call it a tank, a vehicle, into maybe the land fortress.
It's highly probable.
I really want to try and use this somehow for my Thunder Warriors army as a basis of some kind of vehicle. We
need to kind of see it for scale, though, right? Like, the scale is the thing that's eluding me at the minute, because I'm not entirely sure how big it is.
True. I mean, if you look at the two, it looks like a twin stubber at the top. So I think, it's because the other larger vehicles in the Ash Waste game have been reasonably big. So I would suspect it's as long as a Land Raider, but maybe a bit thinner. But definitely short.
I'd say so.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's questionable as towards the scale at this point, but nonetheless, gorgeous miniature, fantastic range. Yet again, I will say it again, fabulous belt buckles on display in these squat minis. They really have delivered the goods when it comes to the belt buckles.
Little nods to classic dwarf iconography, which is kind of what you want.
Absolutely. Indeed. And they are unmistakably dwarfy as well, aren't they?
Oh, yes. They're bearded. That's what I want from my dwarves.
That's it. But yeah, the Vants are whatever. They're fine. But we're not here to talk about, the stuff that they put out recently. We're here to talk about the Warhammer Day previews and all of the fun and frolics that came from there. So as we were saying before, didn't necessarily, in my opinion, at least from the outset, hit the mark as it concerns a celebration of 40 years of Warhammer. Would have been amazing to have seen some kind of, video package that kind of celebrates years of the hobby and shows that kind of generational experience that's been shared by so many of us who have ultimately, played the game for years and years and years, and see it develop through that. And also would have been nicer as well if we just had maybe a little bit more kind of effort going into the kind of celebration box as well, because that celebration box they put out is a bit weird in so much it's kind of cool that they're featuring classic stuff, but it is a real smorgasbord. I mean, ultimately to have just put the Warhammer logo and then slap 40 years underneath it on a hoodie isn't exactly setting anyone's world on fire. Yes, obviously the classic, the Emperor is kind of cool, but the front, it none of it's really blowing me away, I have to say.
No, it's a £125 box of tat, basically. Really generic merch, as you say. They've sort of rushed out. Let's stick some logos on some stuff and let's package it up. Yeah, it's not wildly interesting, I don't think, and it is just a box of merch. I mean, they probably would have had a lot better luck if they had done £125 box of minis through the ages, starting from very early days of Warhammer. One mini for every say 10 years or something. Even that's just 4 models. That would have been maybe every 5 years then or something. That would have been quite interesting to give a piece of history.
Yeah, if they could have done some of the old iconic sculpts, molded and reproduced old miniatures from back in the day. Maybe they could have given you the famous old named Space Marines from the Rogue Trader era to lean into the kind of Space Marine side of it. Although I believe dwarfs used to sell well back in the day. Maybe they could have given us something that sort of spoke to that. But yeah, no, it's fair to say they fell quite a bit south of the mark in terms of actually celebrating 40 years. Maybe they're holding back, Phil, for the 50th anniversary. That's really where they're going to let us have it with both barrels.
Maybe. Yes,
I sincerely doubt it.
I have to say also, so I normally, when I watch the reveals, I'm on my laptop. I just put it on full screen. I don't watch the chat. I just watch the reveal, and I sort of save myself from seeing any spoilers because I try and either watch it live or hide myself from social media until I can watch it if I'm running late. I was actually traveling on Saturday, so I was in the car being driven. I wasn't the driver, of course. So I was watching it on the Twitch app on my mobile, and for whatever reason, it seems like you can't just watch the video. You have to have the live chat as a sidebar. So I was constantly looking at the chat as I was watching the live stream. It's like, dear God, it was so toxic. It was actually quite shocking and also really disappointing that this is what the fandom is. It was just people moaning about, their thing isn't being shown. It's people moaning about how AOS is rubbish or 40k is better than the old world, or people saying the old world is better than 40k. Some people saying, oh, wow, AOS has the best models. Why can't 40k have them? Or people moaning that they're talking about rules rather than minis, or it was just constant moaning and people sort of having a go at each other. And I was like, oh dear Lord, the moderators must have a hard time getting rid of the worst stuff. But it was really disappointing to sort of read that, and I'm quite glad I've never bothered to really engage in that chat for a good year or so. Yeah.
You're much more of a fan of saving your complaints to put on here,
Well, exactly. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
We're as bad as everyone else, Phil, or at least I am. You tend to maintain a relatively even keel throughout all of it. I am. I am one of those toxic trolls.
Yes.
Anyway, let's get into some toxic trolling. So, as we've established, 40th anniversary, who cares? But at the end of the day, we did get to see some new stuff. So let's talk about that. So first of all, we have none other than Imhotep, the Stormlord, one of the famous warlords of the Necrons. Typically, as far as I've always been concerned, at least in terms of how the miniature and or the kind of character has been positioned in the lore of old, Imhotep has, until the arrival of the Silent King, always been the biggest and bestest of the Necrons. He was like the
Marnus Calgar of the Ultramarines until Gilliman showed up.
Until the Silent King came along and stole his chips. Imhotep the Stormlord used to be the boy, the big bad. Now, not so much, it seems, Phil.
No. Well, I guess he still is, but not. He's not up there with the Silent King, but he's going to try his best to do second place.
Absolutely. So as a miniature goes, Imatec is a lot skinnier, I want to say. He's lost some of his bulk. He's obviously been skipping the gym. He's become a lot more slender, it's fair to say.
Oh, I never really thought about it, but maybe he's just a bit more true scale, or they're making the most of the kind of quality of plastic that they can get. Because wasn't the original one metal then fine cast?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so the original one was or is presently a fine cast mini. But yeah, like I think that's the thing though. Like, not only has he kind of lost his bulk, he's also and as a result, his kind of his stature. I mean, the thing about kind of Imatec beforehand was he was a very bulky Necron Lord, which definitely set him apart from his peers. Obviously, all the other kind of Necron Lords were more, well, like this new sculpt, right? Like that kind of size and scale. He also had a very unique face. He had more kind of chunky features, a lot more of a kind of rounded, face. Again, this new Imatec is definitely of the kind of standard Necron Lord face. I mean, if I'm honest with you, in many respects, many of the aspects of Imatec and what kind of made him what he was before have effectively been removed in this miniature. Like, in a way, it looks like a totally different character to what Imatec has been in the past. I mean, at the end of the day, he's got his hand, although, again, even that lacks some of the kind of scale and kind of, fret of the old miniature. I think this is fine. I'm not saying for a moment that it's bad. It's just interesting that they've taken a character like Imatec, who had a very specific style, and utterly abandoned it in favor of giving us a guy who looks more like I'm trying to remember now what the other Necron Lords are called. What are the other ones, Phil? I can't remember the other one.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. There's I've got to try and pronounce it. Onrak the Traveller?
Yes, I think he looks a little bit more like that one, I want to say.
And there's also the generic Overlord, which he actually looks a bit more like as well. Oh, and Trajan the Infinite as well.
Yeah, he looks. Oh yeah, not that. Yeah, it's definitely Trajan Trizan the Infinite.
Trizan.
Yeah, he looks much. Yeah, he looks much closer to that, and then obviously remarkably similar to the Overlord. Again, I'm not saying it's a miss, because I think Necron sculpts are kind of cool, and this guy is cool, but he's very by the numbers. It's not an especially impressive or unique Necron Lord. If you hadn't told me that this was Imatec, I would have been like, so who's this supposed to be then? Oh, it's just a new Lord mini. Fair enough. Who cares? But no, apparently he's Imatec. So, well done him, I suppose.
I sort of know what you mean. I've just been looking at the old model, and the old model is a little bit derpy. I would actually say, and initially when I first saw it, I was like, oh, whatever, just Necron. Like, wasn't too impressed by it. But looking at it now on a bigger screen, I actually really like it. I like the proportions. He's definitely gone from squat to stature. I think I like that they've sort of given him a glow up, right, to make him look more fitting and in line with the more modern Necron range. Yes, his head is a bit more generic, but I think they've done that to make him fit in with the Necrons. But I think it is one of those classic ones where they've just taken the sculpt and made it slightly nicer, because it's the same pose, the detailing is quite similar. But yeah, I don't mind it. I think it's pretty good. But yeah, he's maybe lost a little bit in in the face, but I don't mind.
Yeah.
I think the old one kind of looks terrible. Like it's aged, put it that way. I mean, it was probably great at the time, but yeah, the new one just looks loads better.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I'm not going to tell you that this one doesn't look better than the old Imitech, because it obviously does look better than the old Imitech. It's
but
just
you are right. He
of,
could just be a generic overlord, and I would be like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess so. But
you just want a few extra
that's kind of what he is.
designs.
He's a named overlord.
Yeah, exactly. But you just want a few little extra bits to make him kind of stand out a bit, maybe. I mean, again, the basing details are nice. I like the fact that he's standing on his kind of, plinth and stuff. I think that's quite pretty. And there are some good elements to this. I mean, great elements to this, in fact. It's just, it's not overly remarkable, but it's good overall. I think, again, it's a 7 out of 10 in so much as it's functionally fine, not groundbreaking, not perfect, but as a mini in its own right, it's fine. In fact, I'll probably give it a 6 out of 10 because it's not blowing me away, but it's perfectly fine.
I think I'd be leaning more towards like an 8. Like it is good.
Ooh, the 8, bloody hell. Next bit of this is the Necron Codex with the new artwork, Phil. The new...
No, I saw that and I thought you would be pleased.
Well, I'm going to do a little bit of a jogging of the memory to remember what the Necron Codex of old looked like. Hang on 2 seconds. Because I can't remember. Yes, the old Necron Codex. Yes. No, I think actually, this is an improvement over the old Necron Codex artwork. Although I did like the artist who did the old Necron Codex artwork because it seemed like it was in that more kind of painted style that whomever it was who was doing the Gene Stealer Cult and AdMech covers had sort of done. So I would definitely say that there's a lot to love about the old cover. But the thing is with it is because it features the really silly Scorpec Lord guy on the front, and he's in a really kind of weird pose. That Scorpec Lord always reminded me of the robot in the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd movie. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the one that's sort of deactivated and then comes online. Yeah,
that's the one. That's the one. It sort of had that vibe to it, and it wasn't done nearly as well. But again, it's not a remarkable cover, but it's fine, and it's nice that it's new artwork. So, it's good that we're seeing the first piece of original artwork for this run of codexes. What a treat, eh, Phil?
Yeah. Well, it's also sort of showing off the new mini, but also that legged Walker Warlord was so 9th edition. We've got to now talk about the new guy, so that's why they've clearly upped the artwork style. It's kind of cool. I love the little, you can see the flies in the distance overhead. Oh my god, it's a nice little touch.
It's true. It's a nice little feature to make sure that they've included the croissants flying by. There are also rules in this article, Phil, but I'm not going to talk about them because I don't care. Do you care?
No, and neither did the chat, apparently. They were just like, show us the minis! We don't care about rules. Save that for community articles. And, they've got a point to an extent. It did feel a bit like filler, and we will look at these more in detail when the codexes inevitably come out.
Exactly. When that day comes, we'll pay attention. The next of the reveals was probably one of the most memed things to come out of Games Workshop since maybe the ATV, to be completely honest with you. Do you remember the reveal of the ATV? There was
Yes, all the Mario Kart memes. Yes, this is definitely probably silliest mini of the year, hands down.
I would say so.
Yeah,
I would say so. The Sindonian Scatros Pops Oh no, that's the rest of the statement. There you go.
It's the Sindonian Scatros.
Scatros.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a Scutari on stilts. It's probably going to cost you 30 quid. And it's terrible. I mean, yeah. Is it terrible? I don't know if that's... But it's not good, is probably where I would go with. I don't think Darren Latham's going to do a post on his Instagram where he talks about being proud of being part of the team that made this.
He might do, but who knows? I mean, I'm sure there's a scene in Mad Max Fury Road where they're walking through the wastes, or there's like a swampy bit, and there's these like little, and you only see them as silhouettes, like these little stalkers, so like stilt creatures walking around, and it feels like that had maybe inspired this. So I think concept-wise, like stilted snipers, kind of cool. Feels a bit practicality. As soon as you fire a shot, you'll just be knocked backwards due to the force, unless there's some seriously cool stabilization happening on it. I think certain elements of it, basically the stilts is the silly bit, right? If you look at the top half of the model, he's got maybe a bit too much like junk on him in terms of like the little camera like that he's got on one of his backpack arms. Like if you took those bits away, I think, the actual base mini is really cool. Like he's got like a cool little gas mask. Maybe the little scope at the top is a bit too much, but I think all of that is good. The kind of weird, like, I want to say phallic exhaust that's hanging down from his legs just seems a bit odd. I don't think that helps the model at all. Just clip that off, please. Yeah, it's just, and the stilts just seem too plain and simple. Like that needs more detailing or more wiring or something or needs to be thicker. It just feels like that it's a mini that as soon as it gets knocked over once is going to snap as well from a practical point of view.
Yeah, I mean, AdMech are notorious, and I own an AdMech army, and it is awful for falling apart. I took it to one event once, and I vowed never to use it at an event ever again, because literally the minute it makes contact with the air, it starts to crumble into dust. And the idea of, using this in gaming is just ridiculous. Like, I think sometimes Games Workshop really do fail when it comes to making gaming pieces. I think they do succeed in making beautiful miniatures almost always, but not only did they kind of fail on that front on this part, it's also just, from a gaming perspective, super impractical. I mean, this guy, I just don't really understand what they were thinking with this one. Again, don't get me wrong, the AdMech range has definitely had some controversial moments within it. It's definitely had some bad sculpts, but equally it's had some of the best sculpts ever. Like, I remember when the Ornithopter came into existence, people looked at that and were a little bit like, ooh, what you're trying to go for here? But that's definitely grown on people over time. But then when they kind of expanded that with the winged guys, with the flamethrowers, I mean, that was some of the best stuff we've seen in years. So, the AdMech probably on average has had some of the most controversial kind of additions made to it, because it is this kind of mishmash of stuff.
Yeah, they're a crazy, wildly inconsistent range, and that's sort of by design. I think the very initial launch, when we had Scutari and AdMech as separate codexes, they were sort of quite standard. You had the Honor Dune Crawler, which was like, it's kind of clearly a vehicle, but on legs. Okay, we get that. And everything else was sort of just infantry, and you had the robots. And I guess you had the breaches as well, right? But they consistently weren't too crazy. And then the last lot of releases they did were just wild. You had, a winged plane that flaps around. You had the winged guys, you had the doggo horse riders.
So good, those models. So good.
Oh yeah, they're good, but just kind of crazy, right? It's Leonardo da Vinci's wildest nightmares and dreams all combined. And I think that was the design aesthetic that they were going for. And yeah, I think because of that, sometimes it's hit and miss. I love the gun on this guy. I love a gas mask. I kind of like the backpack with the arms, because clearly one of them's like a shell that he's loading in, but it sort of ruins the silhouette because there's just like quite a lot of stuff going on. And then the legs just seem far too spindly for what they are. But I guess that's part of the AdMech aesthetic. Maybe it will look really cool in person. It'd be interesting to see how it kind of plays on the tabletop. But yeah, it seems interesting as an idea, as mad as it is.
Yeah. But no, I mean, for me, 3 out of 10, it's pretty terrible.
I was probably going to say like a 4. 5 if I'm generous for kitbash potential. But yeah, I think its legs are almost just too long.
I definitely think for its kitbash potential, there's definitely some fun that you can have with this thing. I think if you just chopped off the stilts and chopped off the stupid hose pipe and just had him on normal Skitarii legs, I think he could probably be elevated quite a bit. But yeah, like you said, Phil, there's a lot of actually okay stuff going on in the top third of this miniature. It's just those stilts and the silhouette are just horrible. So yeah, I'm not loving it. And I'll tell you another thing I'm not loving is how they can take probably one of the best covers of 9th edition and make it worse. Like, I don't understand how they've taken the old artwork and then decided to basically, because obviously when they produce these digital artwork imagery things that they do it in layers. So what they've clearly done is turn off the background layers and then replaced it with this horrible kind of turquoisey blue color and then slapped an icon on the background of it. It's taken like one of the most sort of atmospheric and beautiful Codex covers possibly ever, and just made it worse. And don't get me wrong, like, even in the way that what they've done with it, it's still a gorgeous piece of artwork. It's incredible. But it is a shame that, one, we're just getting the same artwork again, and 2, it's even more of a shame that you've decided to muck around with it and make it worse. Like, that's the thing I'm sort of not getting my head around. It's like, why would you take such a cool piece of artwork and make it worse? It doesn't really compute to me, this. It's a really, really bad Codex cover by comparison
it feels
to what
like
it was before.
Yeah, it feels like they brightened the bottom area, because there's these 2 Skitarii guys right in the foreground, and normally they were like really dark and you couldn't see them very well. So it feels like they've whacked up the brightness on them so they're more visible. And yeah, with most of the other codexes, you've got this background almost like a screen overlay with the faction symbol, but they're normally like quite subtle. And as you say, here they've like whacked up that brightness on it so it's really visible. And unfortunately, that, as you say, makes the guy stand out too much from the background and ruins the atmospheric nature of the original image, as you say. So yeah, it's not as nice as the original. If they just almost added the symbol in, like sort of faded from the background, that would look nicer. So yeah, a bit of a shame.
Yeah. No, it's really, really annoying to see him do it, because the AdMech cover of 9th edition was fantastic. Seeing it here like this, it's just a real miss.
At least it's not the stilt guy on the cover.
No, absolutely. And it's still a gorgeous piece of artwork. But it's amazing. That's the problem, though, with it. It was so good before. It's just a real shame to see it. If you're going to reuse it, don't do this to it. Don't do anything to it. Just leave it alone. Like, like, I know you kind of feel that chucking in a symbol in the background is sort of tokenistically making it different enough to warrant another 35 quid. But like, mate, like it's just poor. It's bad form, Peter. That's all I can say.
Have you noticed? So if you go down in the article, there's a photo, and it looks like there's some new terrain here. It might not be, but there's definitely some strange-looking shipping containers on the left-hand side of that photo.
Core blimey, Phil. When you're right, you're right. And that's not from the new Kill Team set.
Not that they've shown so far. So some of the flooring maybe in the foreground is. But those, it's weird because the doors, I'm pretty sure, look like they're from either Gallo Dark or some of the, you can actually see them here, the large circular Sector Mechanicum like cylinders. They had little doors in them, and some of them looked like that. So it could just be a sort of scratch built thing that the designers have done, like the terrain army team at Warhammer, to make some new sort of backdrop terrain pieces, and they aren't going to be actual terrain things. Or it could be new style shipping containers that they'll be releasing down the line. Maybe.
Yeah, it's a real mishmash. I'm not, again, no idea. But you are right on the doors. The doors are definitely looking like they've been lifted from other kits, but the actual surrounding container, never.
But the surrounding bit looks almost too good for it to just be as kind of something we've done to make some terrain.
Yeah. I mean, again, they've got those kind of circular kind of platforms around the kind of tops of the energy, or like the sort of tanks, as it were, and they've got those circular tops to them. And I believe those are from the new Kill Team box, which we'll get to in a minute. But I've no idea. Maybe they are. But yeah, that was the AdMech. Overall, relatively disappointing, but hopefully they get some fun rules and they become a cool army once again, because Lord knows they've been in a weird place so far this edition. Next along is Lord Relector Ionus Cryptborn, who is a Stormcast Eternal atop a dragon. Stormcast Eternals, of course, being Age of Sigmar themed. So we've obviously moved over from the realm of 40k into the wondrous world of AOS. Dragon Riders are a very popular concept within the realm of Stormcast Eternals. Games Workshop not willing to kind of give up on the idea that all of us need Stormcast Eternal armies, have obviously taken it upon themselves to combine those two concepts. People love dragons. People love Space Marines. People kind of like Age of Sigmar. Not really. But all the same, we're going to smush those things together, give it a skull mask. Who wouldn't want one of these? Phil, what's your vibe?
This is by far the best miniature of the reveal show. Phenomenally cool. Yes, it's just like a Space Marine chaplain on a dragon, but I don't care. It's pretty awesome. The dragon itself looks amazing. As you say, they've done a few dragons so far. So there's like a character dragon. I think you can have him as two variants because they're brothers or something. And then there's the generic dragon riders that are kind of in the new style Stormcast. They're all phenomenal, and that's kind of like an army in itself. And then this, I guess, just plugs into that. So that's like the newest style of Stormcast. Yeah, very cool mini, like a crazy level of detail. It's great.
I got to be honest, I'm torn on whether this is my favourite mini from this reveal. It's definitely up there. I'd say it's in the top two. I'm just not sure whether it's my number one pick just yet. But yeah, look, I think, ultimately there's a lot to love with this miniature. I think the only thing that maybe kind of marks it down a little bit, in my opinion, is the kind of pose and basing for the dragon itself. I'm not a fan of its kind of lurching kind of posture as it's trying to hold itself on a curved piece of masonry. That's one of those things where it's like, it's weird because it feels like its arse is quite a lot up in the air, and it's a bit kind of haunched in a weird kind of way. Wing details, the kind of membrane and general kind of like design and shape of the wings is really amazing. The scale details and all of those things are really cool. I think the kind of limbs and things are really nice. But I think maybe this is just a picture related thing, because actually as I scroll down and look at the image with the 3 different angles with the version where the dragon is looking more face on, it actually looks like a stronger sculpt actually. But yeah, I think overall, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think the rider is definitely amazing. Gives me real kind of like Berserk vibes, which is definitely no bad thing. And yeah, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, dragon riding stormcasts are pretty cool. So to add one of these to the mix is just extra awesome. I'm not in the business of collecting Stormcast at the minute, but if I had any Stormcast, I'm pretty confident this guy would be being added to my collection. I'd say, yeah, for me, he's a solid 9, this boy. Absolutely amazing. Sorry about that, everyone. Recovered from yet another technical fault. This episode is
a different one this time.
We're consistently dumbfounded by them all. But anyway, Lord Relector on Dragon, good. 9 out of 10. Like it a bunch. Maybe not my favourite miniature from this particular reveal, but pretty solid. Closing thoughts from you, Phil?
I really like it. Every time I see a Stormcast mini, I'm like, is this suitable to convert into a Thunder Warrior? This time, it's a no. And in a way, that's good, because I don't want to have to try and source this mini just for the rider. But yeah, it looks pretty phenomenal.
Fair is fair. No, I think he's pretty great. Next on the Age of Sigmar train, we have none other than Baltharnus. Is that how I'm supposed to be pronouncing it? Or is it Baltharnus? Baltharnus? Belafos.
Could be Baltharnus, yeah.
First Fawn of Kurnoth, no less. You familiar with Kurnoth, Phil, and their escapades?
Not at all.
Fair. This, for me, just to say, this might be my favourite mini from the reveals, weirdly.
Wow.
It might be.
I'm shocked.
Well, here's the thing, right? There's no one individual aspect of it that necessarily, wows me individually. But I think the thing that really kind of looks awesome about it is it looks like it's channeling the energy of the old Wood Elf dude who used to hang out with the dogs. Do you remember that character from the Wood Elves, Phil?
Not the dogs bit, but I'm sure there was a trumpet playing Wood Elf person at one point, yes.
There was a trumpet playing Wood Elf person. Hang on. Let me do a quick Google search for trumpet playing Wood Elf. Right, here we go. What we got for the old trumpet playing Wood Elf on the images, maybe? No, it's not helping me on that side of things. I'm fairly confident he had an appropriately awesome name. He was like a tree fella, but not like a tree man, but a tree thing.
Oh, okay.
Conjuring any...
Not particularly, no.
Well, It doesn't matter. The point is that this mini is channeling that character that I can't remember the name of. Maybe his name is Kurnoff, for all I know. I don't really remember the names of Wood Elves.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Well, if it was, hang on, I've just typed in Kurnoff Wood Elf. No, we're not so fortunate as to get an answer in that one. But I'm telling you, Phil, this chappie is channeling that energy and is riding atop a bug.
Okay.
He's even got the same cape made of leaves, you know. It's the same energy. I swear, this must be the, old character made anew. I just can't believe it would be anything else.
Well, it is odd because normally bugs land on trees, but this is a tree riding a bug.
This
Quite mad.
The absurdity.
It is pretty mad. I think if he was on his own, just on a base, that in terms of a tree man hornblower, he would look awesome. I think the bug sort of feels a bit too static. But I think also the bug in isolation would look quite cool. Sort of Starship Troopers / Tyranid conversion potential, I think, with that creature. The two together seem a bit strange, but, you know, Queen, was it Adriel, is a similar bug riding thing. They all like their bug riders, those Wood Elves. Or not Wood Elves, Sylvaneth. So, yeah, I definitely wouldn't put it as my top mini. Not even second, I'm afraid. But there's elements of both that I like.
Fair. No, I understand that, my friend. But nonetheless, I think this is pretty dead pretty. I like the bug. I think that's quite a cool element of it. I think it's got lots of really nice detail. I like the posing of the character. I like its, big fancy bottom. It's got a fine thorax, is all I can really say on that front. So, for me, he's also a 9 out of 10, as far as I'm concerned. A beauty.
Nice.
Hopefully Richie buys it for his Sylvaneth.
Well, I think he might do. Yeah, I was going to say, because I'm obviously listening to the first Horus Heresy book, and in that there's the World of Murder, which is kind of, is it Mega Arachnids?
Mega Arachnids.
I sort of feel like if you want to kit bash some Mega Arachnids, this model is the go-to place to start off with.
It certainly is. Bear with us, everyone, as we deal with... This episode is going to be atrocious. We really need to fix this. Here we go. All right, we think we got it solved. Just giving you a peek behind the curtain. It's been actually a couple of days since we were recording the stuff that you were listening to prior to this bit. So we're just going to pick up from where we left off. We're going to talk about the regiments of renown that are found in Book 3 of Dawnbringers, The Long Hunt. Testing 1, 2, 3. Phil, are you there?
I am indeed. Hopefully, I don't sound like I'm in some crackly tunnel.
It's funny, actually, because listening back to it wasn't as bad in the recordings as it sounded. Some of the recordings had picked up the weird crackly stuff and others haven't. But, I mean, let's be honest. The listeners will have heard us explain that at tedium at this point. So let's just smash this out. So if you are in any way interested in how Age of Sigmar functions, you may have been made aware that in the events of Dawnbringer Book 1, we found ourselves with these new formations within the world of Age of Sigmar. The until then not really a thing armies of renown, or regiments of renown, weren't they? Regiments of renown.
Let's go with yes. Yeah,
Let's go with yes.
They were like an allied detachment of for your army, so they weren't quite a full army.
Indeed. Well, now we will have new ones of these within the pages of Dawnbringer Book 3, The Long Hunt. So there will be a few of these being added, which will be fun. One of them will be focusing around the roving Moor, which is the ogre. What's the terminology for ogres these days? Sorry, they're the. Do you know? I've forgotten the actual. It's that Augur Moor clan, something or other. My brain's just gone totally dead.
It's something like that.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is the ogres, the really hungry ones, the gorgers, the ones that they have released via Warcry. It looks like they're giving us a regiment of renown for them, where basically you will be able to add a unit of these to, we presume, any destruction army. So the way it's worked in the past is we got a Gloomspike Gitz, a Flesh Eater Court, a Fire Slayer, and a, what was the last one we got? There was a Chaos one as well. Oh yes, the Plague, the Nurgle army.
Oh yeah.
So they all got new, basically Chaos. Each faction got a new regiment of renown, and if your army was led by a general that was from that order, i.e., or from that sort of faction, so if you had a Death army and you were, Night Haunts, you could add to your Night Haunts this regiment of renown of Flesh Eater Courts if you were destructive.
Yes, but basically you couldn't have your main faction couldn't be the faction you were adding as a regiment of renown. It was everything but them. Absolutely.
And by all accounts, that seems to be what they're doing with these. So they're giving us a new load of regiments of renown that do like special gimmicks. So they're giving us the new Fire Slayers one, where they can basically ride around in Magnadroths, so kind of nicking the gimmick from the Cadron Overlords. So it's not just those dwarfs that find themselves getting stuck in. You can now also do it with the Cadron Overlords, and then also there is a new Dragon Regiment of Renown, which is built around the new Lord Relictor on Dragon model. And I believe there's also a new Sylvaneth Regiment of Renown being added around new Hornblower Man. So that's quite nice to see those coming back. Yeah, exactly, right? It's a cool thing. It will justify the expense of these boxes that they'll try and sell us. Because Lord knows they can't just sell us this stuff on their own. They have to go, no, you want man blowing a horn alongside flappy bugmen and archers. And then obviously Im on the dragon will come with a couple of extra dragon riders. And I'm not really sure off the top of my head what they're going to be adding to the Gorgers and the Fire Slayers, but I'm sure it'll be something.
Yes, I'm sure it will be. Oh God, it is raining terribly outside, but hopefully that will be picked up along with all the other audio problems I've been giving you guys. It's Ogre Moor Tribes.
Ogre Moor Tribes, that's the wording. I was...
you were nearly there.
Nearly there. But yeah, look, long story short, I like the Dawnbringer series. I've liked what they're doing with the narrative in Age of Sigmar so far. I think it's quite fun. I like the idea of, the Dawnbringer series and what it's kind of focusing on. And, obviously, Stormcast Eternals are in a kind of weird place at the minute because even though they've been a range that's only been around for a little over, 9 years now, or a little under 9 years now, they seem to, within that time span, had release upon release upon release. So they're becoming, almost primarified or primarisified sooner than Space Marines obviously have been by quite a considerable margin.
That is interesting in and of itself. And it will be really interesting if they go back and actually... I think it's Thunderstrike armor is like the new style, which is a bit more sort of true scale. If they go back to some of the older ones and put them all in the new Thunderstrike armor, quite interestingly, they've actually done that in the new computer game that they've previewed. I can't remember the name of the squad, but I think is it not Vindicators? It's the original ones with the standard shields. Like the classic Stormcast. I think those ones are in the new Thunderstrike armor in the game. I don't know if that's hinting as to what the models will be going forwards, or if they've just done that for the sake of the game. But that would be interesting if they, redo the existing Stormcast.
Indeed. Well, it does seem like they're doing it from a character perspective, because as I understand it, that Lord Relictor guy on Dragon is a Lord Relictor of some renown from stories at the very least.
Yeah, from AOS 1, they sort of talked about it on the stream briefly, and that, so he's now got a dragon version, which is kind of cool that there's like an evolution of characters and models within the game structure based on like what they want to do with the lore. So I think that's very cool. Weirdly, I still haven't got book 2. It's stuck in the post at the moment at some kind of postal depot in Swindon, along with my Space Marines Codex that is long overdue. So hopefully I'll get both of them soon, because and then I can get book 3 when it comes out as well.
Indeed. Moving on to other topics, Kill Team Phil. We have seen the release of not only fancy new scouts, but also fancy new aspect warriors in the form of striking scorpions. You would think, and you'd be right to think, that I would be really excited by the prospect of these new striking scorpions. And I certainly was from a prospect perspective. Now, I don't know if it's just paint job or the repetition of the posing, or potentially that you just didn't realize how good you had it with the old, or rather up till this moment in time, current Jez Goodwin sculpts from back in the mid 2000s. But I don't quite know what it is that hasn't necessarily blown me away with these scorpion sculpts. I think weirdly, there's something about the way that they've kind of taken them and turned them into this kind of sleeker plastic form that didn't immediately wow me in the same way as the Dark Reapers and the Banshees. It's not to say they're bad, they're anything but. They are really awesome. And Striking Scorpions, in my opinion, are one of the most iconic units in all of Elder. It's definitely, for me, the unit that really actually is responsible for getting me into 40k in the first place. I still remember seeing the Striking Scorpions in White Dwarf and just being like, oh my God, I need to get involved in this business. This unit is a very special one in my opinion. But maybe my expectations were too high, but the Scorpions leave me a little cold. But that's not to say I don't appreciate and respect that they are good. But it's not like the Gene Stealers or the Terminators or the other examples that I can't immediately conjure up where they've taken the old and rejuvenated it into something utterly stupendous. This is just like, it's all right. It's, it's good. It's just not for something isn't quite there. And I don't know what it is. It's quite an ethereal thing, but maybe it's just the fact that there are scorpions without helmets, and that kind of just weirds me out. Maybe that's what I'm dealing with here. But I don't know. What's your perspective on these scorpions, Phil?
Whirlwind of death. So when I first saw this on the live stream, I was slightly underwhelmed, and I think it was because they look quite static. And then I had a look at the old Jez minis, and they're also quite static, but I sort of imagine Striking Scorpions to be a lot more like Assault Intercessors running around, swinging their chainsaws about in really much more dynamic poses. So I think partly they just seem a bit underwhelming from that point of view. And then I think it was on the live stream, there was like a picture so you could see a squad of 10 all together. And you can't see it as much on the page dedicated to this on Warhammer Community because they don't give you that. But the poses are quite repetitive. So obviously you get like 5 bodies. And then it feels like even when they're using different arms on different bodies, like they feel a bit more repeated, or even when they've changed the pose, even when they've changed the bodies and the arms, the overall poses still feel quite similar, even though they're actually made out of different components. So yeah, they just come across as really repetitive, which is a bit of a shame. And I feel then maybe also there's something to do with the proportions of the models look slightly off. And it might just be that they've got big giant helmets and big shoulder pads, and that's like throwing off the balance of the mini, and they seem a bit too top heavy or something. And obviously they've got all this blister style armor on them as well, so they don't quite necessarily represent their actual proportions. But yeah, something just seems a bit off on them.
Yeah, it's so weird because you look at the old sculpts, and obviously, rose tinted glasses tell you that these current sculpts that we have are quite good, and they are, right? But when you look at them side by side, it's so obvious that these new Scorpions have crisper details. They're much more beautiful, I suppose. It's just the thing is with it, it's almost like, I don't know, like the posing, they're very upright, they're very straight, and it's not that striking Scorpions would run around the battlefield wildly waving chainswords around. They've always been more of a kind of predator stalker character. So their perspective has been to kind of hide in the shadows and to kind of stalk prey and appear and to, strike with a level of kind of brutal precision. But equally, I mean, they're not like finessed in so much as historically they've also been more of a kind of anti-infantry thing. So they're very efficient at like chewing through orcs and tyranids and those kind of entities. Their weaponry is just much better equipped for that kind of function. So yeah, like I think my expectations based on the work that went into Dark Reapers, Banshees, Shining Spears, the three other aspects that we have so far. I think, the Reaper minis didn't necessarily like blow me away necessarily, but I feel like the Reaper minis definitely were very representative of that, aesthetic, and they looked pretty acceptable. But the Morgan Ra sculpt was truly spectacular. The Banshee sculpts I thought were fabulous. I think they just did a really amazing job with the Banshee sculpts. But again, Jane Czar really elevated that release and brought the whole thing together in a really interesting way. I think one of the things that is also kind of interesting looking at this squad is the fact that Karandras, or Karandras, whatever, however you pronounce it, the Phoenix Lord of the Striking Scorpions, isn't present with this release. And I think that Phoenix Lord model also kind of adds something to it.
I guess that will come later, though.
100%, yeah. Like, there's absolutely no way that we won't be getting a Phoenix Lord sculpt shortly after this release. But yeah, I think, here's the thing. To me, Striking Scorpions are a beautiful, incredible, iconic unit that I really, really love. This version of them is objectively quite good. And I think if we see painters really going to town on these miniatures, I'm sure they're going to start to really kind of raise the stakes in terms of what they look like when you're putting them down on the battlefield. But as they are in these photos, I think for me, they're kind of 8 out of 10 territory for me. They're still Striking Scorpions. They're still kind of cool. But, I don't think they've captured the essence of them in the same way as I said already, the Gene Stealers and Terminator sculpts have managed to kind of take or even like Sternguard, like the new Sternguard sculpts, they take like the essence of what that unit is and really elevate it. These guys I kind of put more in the kind of Assault Space Marine category, where the new Assault Intercessors with jump packs haven't quite nailed it.
Right.
This is in that sort of same vein, I'd say.
That's fair enough. It's weird because there's definitely like one or two of the sculpts that I really like. Like there's a guy who's like leaning forward, sort of firing his pistol with his sword down beside him. He looks phenomenal. And then there's like maybe one or two that are that good, but then a lot of them don't quite hit home run. And I think, as you said, the bare head options look a bit odd, especially like the sort of half helm ones, which is a bit Primaris-y in terms of style, but obviously they're trying to add new features to models. So yeah, it doesn't do it for me, but other people might love it. So, I'm not going to necessarily criticise people for liking these models. I wouldn't necessarily give this an 8 though. I would probably say it's more of a solid 6. with one or two models being an 8.
It's weird, right? Because like scorpions are my jam, so it's like I it's a weird thing. Like aesthetically, I'm always going to struggle to not give them a high grade, but they're not where I want them to be. Like, to be honest with you, when I heard that the Scorpions were getting the re-release, because someone told me moments before I saw them, they're like, "Oh, Dan, striking Scorpions," and then they showed me their phone, and my enthusiasm and excitement for the sculpts was really high, and then I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, that's not quite what I was hoping for."
Fair enough. And yeah, as I said about the bear heads, I'm sure hopefully like Space Marines there have all helmet options if you do want it, and the bear heads are just like bonuses. So, and as we often say, like if a model doesn't look very good in the photos, like sometimes you'll see it in person and just fall in love with
100%.
it, and it's just whatever. It's the angle, it's the fact that it's 2D and you're actually looking at a 3D model. I think it plays a big part to it, and obviously the paint job as well sometimes. And it'll be great to see, as we say, the community get their hands on it, painting it up in their style. And sometimes when you see that, you'll then be like, "Oh, actually, I really like this model now."
Yeah, totally. The next of the Kill Team reveals in this box set is the Scouts. The Scouts are, in my opinion, fine. I think my quibble with the Scouts, if I can be so bold, is the paint scheme that they've done and the way that GW have photographed this. And this could also be true at the Scorpions, but I just think this is the thing. I am 100% confident that I will see Scouts on the table and I'll be dead impressed with them. I know they're that kind of unit that when a painter that isn't painting in an heavy metal style and we're not looking at them in this 2D form has put them on the table, I'm very confident that we're going to see some really, really, really beautiful versions of this, range of miniatures. I think there's a lot of versatility of them. I think there's a lot of really cool elements to them. Scouts, to me, are obviously not as iconic as the kind of Space Marines, but, they have been a staple of the range. And, this is clearly an improvement, but these photographs are wowing me at the moment. It's not like I look at this and go, "Oh, cool, blimey, I really got to get a unit of those." But I dare say I'm going to see some beautiful painted versions of these very, very soon. And as I understand it, for the points that they cost, they're definitely going to be popular within Marine armies. So you are probably going to see these guys in a lot of people's lists, or you're certainly going to see them around. So I don't think it's a bad unit by any stretch of the imagination, because they're Scouts, for goodness sake. But what I'm seeing here is one of those things where there's something about it which just isn't taking it the extra step. You're just sort of looking at it like, yeah, fine. They look like Scouts at the end of the day. What's your take on them, Phil?
I'm going to disagree with you, Si, because I love these.
Brilliant, that's
these
great.
Are phenomenal. There's one or two that isn't necessarily like the best sculpt. Like I think the missile launcher guy doesn't quite hit it home for me, and I can't quite put my finger on it. What
the
it
posing
is.
of it makes him look quite fat.
Toes is too static. He's very upright.
Yeah, he looks a bit. He looks, because he's on his tippy toes firing a missile launcher. It's kind of weird.
Oh God, he is. I guess. Because I assume the arms are compatible with any of the bodies, and maybe that's the one you're meant to build it with. But I think if he was on a kneeling pose or something like that, that would be awesome. Mm. And I doubt there is a kneeling pose option. And then the heavy bolter ones, again, similar. I don't know. Not necessarily as good as the others, but I really like them. I look at all the bear heads and I go, "Oh, this is phenomenal. I want a load of these for my Thunder Warrior conversions." Especially the gas mask guy, he's really awesome. I just like how chunky they are, and I think when they revealed these before, I was like, they just look like dudes in spacesuits, like human scale Caradron overlords, and I just love it. It just looks really cool. The only downside is I can't actually bring myself to have these for my Minotaurs army, because one of the few rules I have for my Minotaurs army is they've all got to have helmets on. So yeah, I'd almost buy a squad of these specifically for Kill Team, so I can paint them up in a different chapter, and just play them as with Kill Team and nothing else. And I think that would be quite fun.
Wow.
And I think I'd enjoy the models for the sake of, because I just really rate the models. I think they're really
There's
good.
no reason why you couldn't create a narrative where, say, you painted these guys up in, like, I don't know, Ultramarines or Blood Angels or whatever color scheme you go for, and you just have it that, you know, your Minotaurs are coming to help them out. It's like, oh,
That's true.
you know, we sent some scouts.
Now we're chapter agnostic.
Exactly,
yes.
because again, it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, at the end of the day, if you put these down on the tabletop and it's a big old unit of Ultramarine scouts, it's like, well, okay, whatever. It's like, who cares nowadays? It's like, it's just Space Marines, isn't it, at the end of the day?
That is true. Yeah. No, they're that's a good idea. Worth considering. For
Oh,
sure.
100%. I think for me, I definitely still put these in that kind of 8 out of 10 category. I think they're fine. And I know that I'll see gorgeous versions of them. I think as a kit, it's clear that there's lots of really good things you can do with it. I just think there's something about the way they've painted them here that just doesn't blow me away. I think
it's grey fabric, black armor, and then it's shown on a black background.
Yeah.
So it's quite dark, I guess, and that's not necessarily showing you the best. Showing you in the best light, but I don't mind it personally. I think it does the job.
No, that's fair. I'll be honest though, again, I sincerely at this point, I much prefer the neophyte sculpts for the Black Templars.
Yeah, quite a lot of people have said that, I think, because they are pretty good. And they've got, what I like about them is they've got bare arms.
The weird thing is when you actually go and look at the neophyte sculpts is they are slenderer, but then the entire Crusader squad is slenderer. Like there's something weird about the Crusader squad, which is it's the most slender unit of Primaris Marines by quite a considerable way. If you look at like normal intercessors and then you look at a Crusader squad, the Crusader squad tends to be a bit thinner. And again, the kind of silhouettes and poses of the unit are just a little bit more, I don't know, it just sort of works a bit better. But yeah, they do have the bare arms, and they do also have the tabards as well, and that obviously covers up a lot of areas that you know, sort of, I don't know, just sort of adds to the whole thing. But yeah, they're much sort of slenderer, I would say, which I think sort of helps in terms of their posing.
Yeah, I also like their slightly derpy bowl cuts.
Oh yeah, that's one of the best bits about them.
Because in a way, it's like, as a rite of passage, all spacemen should just have that haircut by default.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree.
It's the hazing of the Space Marines.
Yeah, we all must have bowl cuts. The thing that people have been talking about a bunch with this kill team is the terrain, and the fact that for the first time ever, GW have opted to not sell you the terrain in the box set. So now the terrain is just a extra feature that you can gain access to should you want it. I have to be honest, the terrain that they've created and the map that it sort of sits on, I mean, I've got nothing against the plastic components necessarily, but the color treatment they've done on it and the kind of, it's a very busy kill team map, it's fair to say. But there's nothing objectively bad about it as a terrain set. I mean, it's fine. It's just something about the color really isn't doing it for me.
Yeah, it's very red. Concept wise, as like an oil rig, great. I think that's awesome. We talked about it before. There's a great oil rig diorama at Warhammer World in the exhibition centre. That's phenomenal. This is sort of doing a mini recreation of that, I guess. Yeah. I think my problem with it is it feels very recycled in terms of parts. So the main central cylinder column is from the Adeptus Mechanicus terrain or Sector Mechanicus terrain. The top bits look like they're from there as well, but the pillars that they're standing on are like half size, so they're not the full Sector Mechanicus ones, and they look almost a bit like some of the Riser ruins, but obviously I think they're completely unique. It's interesting that they're lower down, though, I think. But it just comes across as a bit too computer game, like, platformy to me. Like, there's, or at least the way they've laid it out, it's like no one would build anything like that. It's just illogical. You meant to just jump around constantly. It feels like there needs to be more defined
What do you mean,
to it, or more walkways.
What do you mean? Do you mean you wouldn't just randomly have a floating platform in the middle of nowhere?
Probably, like, I don't mind a floating platform if it was like a landing pad or something. So, like, what's interesting is the circular top to that cylinder is different because it used to be all angled.
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
not circular. That was painted up like a helipad, let's say, for Narva Lighter. Brilliant. That could sort of be on its own, I guess. But yeah, all the other like walking platforms don't lead to anywhere. I guess that's just how they've laid it out, though, right? You could do something a bit better with it, but yeah, it just feels a bit restrictive in terms of cover or lack of cover, and weirdly mobility. So it's like, if this was lots of jump troops, it'd be great. Yeah. Like, there's a short story on Black Library about Elysian drop troops dropping into these like platforms in the sky. So imagine, an oil rig in the air, basically. This would be a perfect way to recreate that. But because you've got troops that are able to like drop down, and you've got planes flying around dropping them off as well. Here, when you have two units that don't have the ability to jump great distances, it seems a bit odd. So I wonder if there'd be interesting kill team rules to represent that, perhaps. Yeah.
Well, you can. I'm pretty sure Kill Team has rules for jumping from platform to platform, but
and maybe that's one of those cool rule mechanics that you never see because you've never got like quite an insane layout like this to do it on. So maybe that's actually a good thing to actually have these rules of like shooting people or knocking them off in combat so they can fall down. That was like one of the great things about Mordheim, is that you have, or like old Necromunda, well, I guess even modern Necromunda probably has it as well, like these abilities like for people to fall down and take damage. So, yeah.
I mean, one thing I will say is where I really see the value in this is that as a kit, it's really great that they have actually introduced these smaller leg sections within Sector Mechanicus. So Sector Mechanicus only had the taller platforms.
Like 6-inch ones, I think, and I assume these will be free.
Yeah, so the only way that you used to be able to have the 3-inch platforms was with the plasma injectors. So they had a specific platform which was like a plasma engine block, and that was the only one that was of a 3-inch height. So you ended up in situations that if you wanted to incorporate walkways that were 3 inches high, you either had to use Zone Mortalis, although Zone Mortalis didn't exist at the kind of beginning of this process, or you ended up using those plasma conduits, I think they were called. So actually, for people who actually really are invested in the Sector Mechanicus system, this is a really nice addition to be able to add some layers to your platforms.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really love about it. And while we're on the topic, did you actually see, Phil, the community article about the Ash Waste kits?
Oh yes, they were talking about, I didn't read it, but I just briefly skimmed it, about how you can connect the components together and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's incredible. So it's something I had no idea about. I mean, to be fair, it definitely feels like GW commissioned this article or got this article done to kind of communicate to those of us who may have an abundance of GW terrain that, hey guys, did you know that if you already have loads of this chunk, you can also add this to it as well? We actually thought about it. And again, it's one of those things that it's just wild to see it, because you're like, oh my God, really? Like, I didn't have any idea that this level of compatibility existed. So it's definitely got me considering the virtues of these new Ash Waste kits, because, I have a lot of the Sector Mechanicus terrain, and I have a lot of the Zone Mortalis terrain. I have a lot of the Sector Imperialis terrain. So it's like, well, if I could start to build some really awesome, unique items and incorporate in some of these components as well, it could really make for some really awesome terrain. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very impressed with that. But yeah, color scheme and the mat itself, really not into it. But I think as a kit, it's highly probable that I don't pick up the kill teams, but I pick up the terrain.
I guess the kill team's going to be sold separately or bundled.
I think
together,
they get bundled together, and then the terrain is sold as like a kill zone or whatever it is.
I guess it'll be down to how expensive the scenery box is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be one of the major kind of variables with it all for sure. But I do like it
because Kill Team 1 used to have really great value kill zones, and then Kill Team 2 is all bundled together with the infantry, with kill teams themselves. So a good bargain if you wanted everything, but quite often you didn't want every single component.
Yeah, it's rare that you wanted all the bits. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that terrain actually, in all seriousness, is good if you already have a lot of the original Sector Mechanicus kits and you can build some really...
Bearing in mind, I don't think you can buy any of it, or you can buy maybe one or two pieces.
Very limited range at the moment. So you can buy like a few kits, and to be fair, they are insane money. Like, I've kind of accrued loads of this terrain over the years. Like, I've just come to own it because of buying various boxes over the years, so I've got like a lot of it. But yeah, God, if I was being confronted with paying £52.50 for a piece of terrain that probably equates to a tiny segment of my board, I just wouldn't go near it. I was able to pick up a lot of this stuff when it was available in different kind of like bundle deals, as it were. And I think I'm very fortunate to be in that situation. Plus, also, to be fair, Imperium magazine or Imperium or whatever the current version of Imperium magazine is quite good as well, because they occasionally do terrain kits. So I remember...
Yes, well, that's true.
I remember when they had the pipes, and I was like, good Lord, it's like getting those pipes is like rare, and they were in the magazine, and for some reason no one wanted them, and I came across a bunch in Forbidden Planet, slightly marked down, and I was like, right, I'm buying loads of pipes, because
brilliant.
It's the way forward. But yeah, look, overall, I mean, it's cool that we're getting these Scorpion sculpts. It's really promising for Eldari players, because obviously theirs is a range that is in desperate need of finishing in terms of updates. This is a step in the right direction. I think when I eventually pick this unit up, I shan't be putting the fleshy faces on it. Scouts are quite cool as well, and the terrain is okay. Like, I mean, terrain... Am I in love with this terrain particularly? Not as they've shown it here, but I think with working it into some other kits, I think it's going to be a really great addition. So, I mean, with everything that is available within GW's terrain system, I'm comfortable giving this. Again, like, the whole thing is an 8 out of 10 as far as I'm concerned. Every component, 8 out of 10, in my opinion.
My only concern, having just quickly read it, that basically they've content locked the scatter terrain with the 2 kill teams. And they're the bits I've always been buying for the last set of terrain.
Oh, yeah.
For the Gallo Dark stuff. And some of it's kind of interesting. I wouldn't, if I could buy those separately, I probably would, just because they just look interesting.
eBay is your ally, mate.
Probably will be, yeah, because I imagine lots of people will just be buying the kill teams for themselves and not caring too much about scatter terrain. It's odd that they didn't either sell that separately or throw it in with the actual main terrain. Actually, what's more interesting is in the long shots of the boards, there's these kind of like cool objective markers, I guess, that like little towers. They look pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean, maybe those come in the kit.
Way. Yeah, I'd assume they come with the board. Overall, yeah, I think it's a pretty solid release. Yeah, as we said, even if the Striking Scorpions don't quite hit the mark over and the terrain, good, but a bit ugly in terms of colour scheme. But yeah, overall, it's not too bad.
Absolutely.
But not one I'm desperate to buy as a whole.
There we go. All right. Last part of these reveals, at least, Warhammer the Old World. Obviously, myself and Phil don't necessarily have much of a kind of, we haven't got much skin in the old world game, but it's fair to say, Phil, that these Bretonnian releases I mean, they're pretty spectacular, right? Are they making you interested? Will you play Old World?
Yeah, would I play Bretonnians in Old World? Probably not, purely because, I don't know, I've got a bit of an old love for dwarves in Warhammer Fantasy, because that's what I very first started with. And even though they're not one of the armies that are being particularly focused on, I would be potentially dabbling with my old army. If I wanted to dust it off, I would do that probably for simplicity's sake, or my old Lizard Men army. Bretonnians, I've got some of the old original ones because I bought, I think it was 4th edition Warhammer, where it was Lizard Men and Bretonnians. So I've got some. I was planning on selling them when I could get my hands on them. These models are gorgeous, though. The Pegasus model, phenomenal. The Knights on Foot as a concept, I just love. I always love Knights on Foot in whatever form they take. They are stonking good. What's interesting is the little standard they've got really reminds me of the Adeptus Sororitas, partly because of fleur-de-lis, partly because they've got that very 3D little shrine that they're carrying around, which the sisters also have. But yeah, I really like that. What do you think of those new models?
I mean, how anyone could look at these and not tell you that they are phenomenal. I mean, here's the thing, right? With like the specialist games department and the guys that are working on, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, Old World, Heresy, or is that Citadel? I never know.
Heresy is meant to be specialist games.
Okay.
Yeah. But they do a lot of it in plastic.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming they do a decent amount of this in plastic as well, right? Because, Forge World / specialist games don't... Because obviously most of Blood Bowl's in plastic, right?
All the teams are, yeah. All the characters tend to be in resin. And I think that's going to be the same here. So I believe the Pegasus will be resin. I would hope to think the Knights on Foot would be plastic. And I'm sure they will be because of that standard.
Yeah. But here's the thing, right? So going back to what we started out talking about when going through this and looking at those new squat minis and everything they're doing there, like this team just seem to knock it out of the park at the moment. Like, I think there's obviously something special going on in specialist games at the moment. They either just have the right mix of talent or they're fostering the right kind of environment, because on average, Games Workshop Citadel releases pretty good miniatures. Specialist Games doesn't always 100% get it right 100% of the time, but when they do, they're just leagues beyond what the Citadel team is producing. I mean, that Pegasus, like general, knight, captain, whatever, is utterly incredible. And the fact that obviously you can take him as a standard as well, and that standard bearer looks utterly incredible, is just immense. The Knights of the Realm on Foot, as you said, utterly stupendous. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, it's so hard to not say that this, like, as a range of miniatures is like 10 out of 10. Obviously, there's some old stuff that's going to get mixed in with it, but those are some really iconic old units, and I'm sure they're going to have a real charm and a real place in a lot of Bretonnian players' hearts. And I think it's obviously really great for those, Bretonnian players, because they're going to be potentially owning this stuff already, and they're going to just want to add this new stuff to the range. And I think, sincerely, this seems to be where it's at the moment in terms of just like the quality benchmark. I think, it's been a while now since like these guys haven't given us something that just completely and utterly like moves the goalposts in terms of quality. I think these miniatures are phenomenal. The stuff they've been doing with Heresy, obviously we saw the Phoenician, good old Fulgrim. That is just stupendous. This is just, I mean, 10 out of 10, utterly incredible. Like, I mean, again, I'm not going to play Bretonnians. I'm highly unlikely to play Old World, but if they keep doing stuff like this, I might do. I mean, I really might do, Phil. I can't lie to you. This is kind of, this has got me excited.
They are pretty gorgeous sculpts. I saw a few people in the live chat when it wasn't being super toxic saying that they would be great proxies for Cities of Sigma, and Cities of Sigma was a pretty stunning range. So
absolutely,
credit to the regular Games Workshop studio. They do really good minis. It was interesting. I was watching Rob from Honest Wargamer, and he gave a good analogy between the two departments and was saying that Specialist Games was a lot more succinct and like together, and they kind of design minis with a purpose to fit in with a range or for the game. It's like they know they're doing Bretonians, they kind of work out what things they want to do, and I presume it's much more of a collaborative effort between the designers, the law writers, the rules writers, because it's such a smaller team. And he said regular Games Workshop's like a tap. The miniature team just turn a tap on and miniatures come out, and then it's up to everyone else to work out what to do with those miniatures, which is why you sometimes get these kind of really arbitrary minis that or when we were talking about Arcs of Omen, it's like, okay, you've got these 5 completely random minis, but you're thrusting them all together in a story arc, which doesn't really seem to fit very well, because they're the minis that the lore team's been given to write a story about. Whereas I feel like what Specialist Games do really well is, they sort of make minis with intent. And if you just look at like Siege of Rax, all the like Elysian stuff, like they all tie together beautifully with like a kind of campaign books, and that's the binding driving force behind almost making the miniatures, which works really well, I think.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've said similar things about older editions of 40k, and it definitely felt like back in the day there was more sort of synergy between rules writers, game designers, narrative teams, the artists, and ultimately the model makers. I think GW's current strategy of, churning out miniatures and relying on the rules writers and narrative teams to basically like fit the world around these random things that they're just getting thrown at them is definitely, a counterproductive way of approaching this process. And I think that's, I suppose, for that reason alone, and potentially others, that, if we as a community are invested in, great Games Workshop gaming systems, and we want to kind of have these things, I mean, for a lot of people, it's going to be really exciting that the old world is coming back. But hopefully, people will support it and get involved in it, because, great games like this and Horus Heresy and Blood Bowl and Necromunda, I imagine collectively they probably don't even come close to like Age of Sigmar sales. Hopefully, there is still incentive for them to continue to support and continue delivering this great stuff, because it's just amazing, man. Like, I just think it's incredible. I think it's a weird thing, right? Because the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, you know what? I feel like I should support this release just because I want to kind of like support the efforts of that studio and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's like the Squat Prospect vehicle, a beautiful miniature that almost universally everyone is saying they love it. I suspect sales for it will be absolutely dire, because as much as everyone wants it, most people won't need to buy it because it doesn't actually fit into their 40k army that they play. And it's only, some squat players will all buy it if they're playing Ash Race. A couple of strange people, like maybe myself, like guard players, might buy it to kit bash it. But beyond that, you can objectively say this is a beautiful piece of work, but won't be a sales hit, unfortunately. It won't be a blockbuster. One of the issues I think with Old World, and I saw lots of people talk about it in the chat, was I think lots of people are complaining that it's resin, because people just hate resin, even though it's not that bad. Once you get, there is a learning curve to it for sure. A few people were saying basically because they're redoing some of the older plastic ranges, that they're like, oh, that's killed it for me. I won't want to get into it, because while the new models are gorgeous, the old ones are a bit, let's use the word derpy again. Some of them are a bit dated, and the disconnect between the new range and the old range is a bit too much for some people. They just think it won't look good on the tabletop having these gorgeous new minis versus the older ones. But I think a lot of old models, I think the bowmen are the ones that look a bit too repetitive and maybe not that great out of the ones they've shown here. But I think old models do hold up really well when painted to a high standard. But they are a bit harder to paint. They're a lot smaller. The detail might not be quite as crisp. But on the flip side, there's often less guff on the model. Sorry, there's less pouches. There's less insane amounts of detail that you have to paint up. Like I imagine you could paint up these archers in half the time that it would take you to paint up an equivalent unit for Cities of Sigmar, because there's just so much stuff on those models, as gorgeous as they are. So yeah, I can see some people not getting behind it because it's selling old models versus, new ones. And maybe new ones will come eventually. I've said it before, like in a way, the problem with specialist game stuff is they have such a slow rollout. It's like when Blood Bowl first dropped, you got 2 teams. You had to wait almost, I think, like 2-3 years to like have all the teams come out. Actually, probably even more than that, to be honest, for the full set of teams to drop. So you've got to wait a while for the minis to come out.
Yeah, but to counter that, right? Like, that's one of the things that we kind of champion. Like, you and I have often grumbled about the pace of releases in the 40K and, in the 40K space specifically. So, I mean, in a way, that's actually something I find quite appealing about the idea of playing Old World, that it will move slowly.
Yes, that is true. And I do think actually giving people the chance to buy these old classic models that they, might have to either spend a lot on eBay to get otherwise, I think is kind of a cool move. It's probably a stopgap move to tide people over until they can get around to redoing these models, because they're a small team and they can't just, drop a massive release all at once. And completely redo an entire army. Even Games Workshop don't do that. Like you see them, you've got Elder coming in waves, and we're starting to see potentially the next wave of Elder minis coming out with these striking scorpions. So you can't, expect them to just produce an entire plastic range of every model that existed previously for the Bretonnians, and just be like, oh yeah, here you go. We've done it all in one go. No, that's not how they operate. They like to they preserve momentum and interest in the game system by this like little drip feed method, by slowly giving us releases over time, which might be frustrating if you want everything straight away, but it actually keeps the interest in the game still going. And this is the first time ever we've had Necromunda or even Blood Bowl survive like for a long period of time. Like it hasn't gone away. Normally Blood Bowl sticks around for like 2 years, then you never get much support for it ever again, and it's just the community that keeps it going. But because they're doing this like slow burn method, they've managed to keep the team supporting it and the game in the zeitgeist of the gamers for a much longer period than they'd get otherwise.
Yeah, totally, man. And again, you got to respect it, right? And I think that's a really great thing about all of that. I mean, for me, I don't know what army I would do if I was to do Old World. It's not the Bretonnians, I can say that much, although, again, it is very tempting with these really awesome new miniatures. I think if I was to look into Old World, I mean, I don't really know. I don't know what faction I would do.
Do you know what I would do, actually? Chaos Dwarfs. Like, I really love the old
Chaos.
Minis. I love the Forge World minis as well, but the old, like, big cap minis as well. There's something about them.
Yeah, Chaos Dwarfs would definitely be a cool shout. I think for me, it would probably, for my sins, it probably would still be Wood Elves. I think the Wood Elf range.
Elder through and through.
Well, yeah. I mean, Wood Elves were, Wood Elves are cool. I just think the old Wood Elf range is really awesome. And yeah, maybe Wood Elves or Warriors of Chaos. Maybe Warriors of Chaos would appeal. But yeah, there we go. So look, anyway, all that being equal,
Dan, there's a couple of minis we've missed out. If you want to comment on them, there's the Handmaiden of the Lady.
Oh yeah, more Bretonnians. They all look great, mate. I mean, I don't know how much more I can say about it, but sure, by all means, let's talk about them.
I didn't know if you wanted to give it a rating.
Oh, what the rating?
as a whole
for the Handmaiden of the Lady. Not as good as the one on the horse, or the unicorn, I should say. The unicorn lady is stupendous. This is just really good. I think there's just a lot of really subtle detail in it. I don't understand the whole standing on a flower bit, but I'm guessing they're like ascending via some kind of spear of divine retribution or something. I've no clue. But yeah, I mean, it's all right. I mean, it's not as cool as the unicorn one. That's like a clear 10. This is like this is really good. It's like an 8. It's okay. It's not it's not on the same scale as like the knights on foot, or certainly not the dude on his Pegasus. So, but good, yeah, pretty good.
Fair enough.
But yes. So all that said, that was everything that was revealed for 40 years of Warhammer. I mean, overall, I'd say it was a pretty lackluster set of reveals. I think, obviously, lots of it was good. But again, it sort of just didn't feel like Games Workshop necessarily rose to meet the occasion, I suppose. I think it was fine, but it wasn't extraordinary. By the way, Phil, now that I'm looking through this, I've just noticed that one of the Knights of the Realm on foot has got one of these ladies on his head. Did you spot that? If you go to the Knights of the Realm on foot and you look at the first one, and you look at the guy with the horn, he's got one of the handmaidens of the lady on his head. Did you see it?
Yes. So, like the one on the far. Oh, yes. Okay, yes. The first, yeah. Okay, that's quite mad. I do love it though.
Yeah, I love it too. I think that's the thing. Like this particular squad is, yeah, absolutely. Like this is spectacular. But anyway, yeah. Long story short, I think, is this necessarily what you expect to celebrate 40 years of Warhammer? I mean, it's fine. You could always hope for more. I certainly was. And look, at the end of the day, I'm not even talking about it from a perspective of, they need to reveal a new game system, or they need to give us like a new Primarch and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that these model reveals are, not great model reveals, because many of them are. It's more just the extra bit. It's like, what are you doing to kind of mark the occasion? What kind of community events and things are you kind of putting together to make the whole moment feel special? When 40K launched in 8th and then subsequently 9th edition, they did 24-hour live streams and all this kind of crazy stuff, and it was really community focused. When they launched Horus Heresy, they had that big Horus Heresy event. This just for 40 years of Warhammer, it just sort of feels like, oh, okay.
Well, throughout the year, they've been doing those 40-year articles where they've been talking about models and their historical lineages. For this Warhammer Plus, they've and I actually, good credit to them, not that I'd subscribe to it anymore, but they've recreated an old mission from the I think it's like the Realm Gate Wars, but it's for Quest for Gal Magraz. I can't quite remember the pronunciation. Sigma's Hammer. So from AOS 1, they've kind of recreated a story from that, and they've completely scratch built a board to theme it all together. And you've got 2 gorgeous armies to play out that battle report. And there's a community article explaining how they made the board using some of the old AOS Realm battle boards. So I think that's phenomenal that they put that level of effort into, that for Warhammer Plus. I think, props to them for doing that. And I sort of feel like as a hobby in general, that's the sort of thing they should be promoting. People going, let's do a campaign, or let's build a board that's themed to something that we want to do. I think that's a really cool aspect of a hobby we've sort of forgotten about, especially in 40K, where it's all just, L-shaped ruins on a map. So it's great that they have done something for 40 years. But as you say, for this show in particular, they haven't they didn't elevate it in any way beyond a normal reveal show.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, it's cool that you do that, but when you exclusively put that on Warhammer Plus, it kind of then sort of takes away from the moment. I think it's just like, you want that stuff to be a little bit more discoverable, and it'd be cool if it was on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, because they do occasionally put the odd video for free, so you would have thought maybe this one they actually would have. That'd been quite good.
Yeah, again, it is what it is, right? I don't want to come across like I'm grumbling unnecessarily, but it just feels a bit sort of but whatever. Is what it is. We're going to move on now to whatever it is we decide to do next. Transitional noise. And that's it, everybody. The end of episode 166, although you know better than that. It's this part of the show where me and Phil talk in the general sense about the various things that we're dealing with in the general sense within our hobby lives, at the very least. We don't go into our, existential crises about our ever-aging bodies and our diminishing faculties. That would be not very entertaining for anybody, least of all us, right, Phil?
Well, exactly. We'd just be gibberishing around, I think, if that was the case.
There was a perfect illustration of our diminishing form. Anyway... Yes, it's the outro, so we're going to talk about some general stuff, I suppose. Great episode, I'd say, overall. I think it's always really nice when Games Workshop load us up with loads of cool stuff that we can talk about. Space Marine Codex, the previews,
reveals,
the reveals rather from Warhammer Day, as well as us talking about our campaign in Age of Sigmar. So an action-packed episode, no doubt, although... Full disclosure, this is yet again...
Don't tell them.
This is still the first thing we're recording, so Lord only knows how it actually went. But yeah, it's interesting, man. I mean, did you see that they actually, at the time of recording, before we've even gotten our hands on the Space Marine Codex, they've released their, or they're said to be releasing a Minotaurs field manual for the Space Marine Codex before it's come out?
Oh, no, I didn't see that, actually, which is... Unlike me, I'm normally hot on the pulse.
You're normally hot on the thing. I don't think they've actually put it on Warhammer Community yet. I think it's just sort of circulated amongst the sorts of people that, leak this kind of stuff.
Well, that would explain it then.
It's just interesting, though, isn't it, I suppose, because I think this is obviously becoming more of a common thread now with the way that they're approaching design at the moment, having that kind of weird kind of... hybrid system between the digital distribution via the app and that whole piece, but then also having that kind of old school physical distribution of an actual book, and the idea that you're shipping a product, but then also kind of hitting us with updates to it before maybe it's even out or actually as it's coming out. So it's sort of weird, isn't it, to think that they are shipping a book that has points cost in it that are entirely wrong, at least according to them, from the outset.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a good look, but in the world of these, quarterly updates for points, it's invariable that if you have any kind of codex that comes out around the time of an update, that it will be inaccurate. And I guess what they need to do is, because the normal rules are, whatever was the most recent publication, be that a Minotaurs Field Manual or a codex, that is the most up-to-date points. So clearly the Space Marine points in the codex are the old ones, but because it was, written at least 6 months ago, the Minotaurs Field Manuals come out with new points. Now the new codex has come out with the old points in, so that's now the most valid points. So then they need to do another update digitally to say, oh, actually, these are the new points for Space Marines. Quite confusing. Hopefully the baseline points are relatively okay. So if you're just someone that doesn't like the internet or you don't care about the updates and you just want to play with your core rulebook, maybe one of the GT mission packs, and then you want to play with your codex and just do it all from there, you can still do that and it won't be too imbalanced. So ideally, all the points for all the codexes should be balanced, even that if that's not indicative of any points that are actually used online, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense, mate. It is a bit of an oddity, though, isn't it? Again, I kind of just wish they'd pick a lane sometimes. It's super interesting. We were talking about this during the week. In fact, we were talking about the kind of weird quandary that we find ourselves in at the minute with this kind of 3-year release cycle around, core Warhammer 40,000 and other Games Workshop rule sets. And I think the reason we were talking about it was more in relation to our concerns about potential massive changes to Age of Sigmar. I think, myself and Phil are probably of the same opinion, or at least I believe ourselves to be, that, Age of Sigmar is quite a strong system as is. And what we kind of like about it is over 3 editions, they've obviously innovated to the point that we've got a pretty robust rule set. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Definitely things that they need to and can improve upon with a 4th edition. It's just that worry that we're going to find ourselves in the situation that rather than iterating and giving us a, more kind of robust 4th edition of Age of Sigmar, that they might go a 40k route and go, we're going to throw all that out and we're going to give you a whole new kind of basic set of ideas about how this sort of stuff works. But it's interesting because those cycles, those release, kind of churns that Games Workshop were committed to over the years and years, feels like it makes sense for a whole heap of different reasons. But back in the day, it made more sense given the fact that, digital distribution of information was so much less prevalent, obviously, in the 80s and 90s, that the only way they could update and actually fix the problems that were in old rule sets was to give us a new rule set. So, when they released 3rd edition and they were like, oh, okay, we didn't foresee this being a problem or this being a problem, they gave us 4th edition and they addressed those problems. And then when they realised there were problems there, they gave us 5th edition and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I also think one of the reasons why they did it is they just kind of wanted to consolidate all the...
Sorry about that, everyone. We just noticed Phil had some weird mic technical issues, but we're back now. So anyway, sorry, you were talking about consolidating, Phil.
Yes, and not in terms of movements, but the fact that I think, at least for the codexes, not necessarily a new edition, but the reason why they produce a new codex for an army is because they were consolidating all the places where they'd release rules for models, especially back in, they still do it, obviously, to an extent, but now, nowadays, they're quite often just redoing old units, whereas back in like 2nd and 3rd edition, every unit they released was a brand new unit that you'd never seen before. And a lot of those rules came out in, either White Dwarf, supplements, things like that. So Codex would be a great way of consolidating an army based on all the previous rules released for that army into one new place, and then make little tweaks and updates where they felt it was needed. I guess for the actual edition, modifying rules that they felt weren't working very well, notoriously the psychic phase or sometimes the morale phase.
Yeah, it was always interesting, wasn't it? And I suppose back then as well, they had like White Dwarf that they could kind of put updates in, and they also did those chapter approved volumes as well, didn't they? Where you got
or they did Citadel Journal. They did loads of like sort of the fanzine type stuff, which was more obviously fan rules. But they did, they did some great ones for like More Time and Blood Bowl, at least.
Yeah, it's not to suggest, obviously, that 40k Games Workshop games in general have never been projects which they've consistently updated over time. It's just interesting now that, obviously, as I said, with the kind of advent of the more kind of digital side of things, it's interesting that you find yourself in those situations that they are literally publishing literature books, and it's never been more kind of relevant. Obviously, in the span of 9th edition, we had or even 8th edition, we got day one erratas. Straight away, they were hitting you with updates, FAQs, changes. Codex Space Wolves notoriously had loads of problems in I want to say it was the 8th edition version, the sagas, wasn't it, or something? They added like...
Oh, yes. There was some mistake in them that they corrected straight away. I think I remember you saying it was unplayable at release, and I don't think it was quite that extreme, but it was a big part of how Space Wolves played.
Yeah, I don't think I necessarily went so far as to say it's unplayable. I said it was unacceptable. I think in those situations, Games Workshop, as the entity that they are, as a kind of... good customer experience, should have literally, much like they just did with the Leviathan cards when they had misprints, they should have just taken all that stock back, pulped it, and, reissued it to people. And obviously, if someone out there was like, no, I'm happy with just kind of the page because I like the book, I own it now, I like having it, I don't really want to give it up. Obviously, that's up to you as an individual, but they need to give you that as an option, right? Like, ultimately, if they are essentially releasing a document and a statement that basically says, whoopsie, it's not really fit for purpose, I think under those circumstances, you would appreciate it if they gave you the option of returning it and having it replaced for a more appropriate product. But all that being equal, I think that's the interesting thing now is that, obviously we continue to evolve in terms of how that stuff works. And I think what's interesting is it brings into question, though, and I think what's really interesting is it creates this interesting dynamic around the notion of, do we even really need, like, these regular edition updates, right? Or is it better that we just kind of iterate and then mark the start of, like, a new beginning, a new season of, the 40K game, and they kind of consolidate all their updates and give us new faction releases? Obviously, Games Workshop will definitely abide to the fact that they're like, no, this is perfect as it is. But it's always interesting because I'm always curious, is there a better way? Would it be better for us? And certainly Age of Sigmar stands out to me as a potential example of that. Is like, is it actually necessary to drastically change 4th edition Age of Sigmar? Or is it broadly okay just to kind of consolidate the changes that were made in 3rd and just kind of be like, yeah, I mean, it's basically perfect. It's fine. Like, we don't really need to... We made some tweaks, and we're going to, like, change some of these systems because we felt like they were a little bit too exploitative. But broadly speaking, it's the same game. It's just we've taken stuff that we put into, like, FAQs and stuff and just sort of updated it. And to celebrate the fact that it is kind of like a new story in the world of Age of Sigmar, here's a new snazzy box set, and you can obviously get a new snazzy rulebook that has all of the stuff in it. But ultimately, if you've just been playing along for the last, like, 3 years and getting the FAQs and updates and you're kind of okay with how it is, it's kind of like, well, you just kind of carry on. It's like, just as you are.
I think I would quite like that. And it felt like the genesis of that was 8th edition 40K, where I'm sure at one point someone on either the live stream or it was in the community post where they were almost like, this is not to say it's the last edition, but it's like, this is 40K now in terms of, kind of like, this is the only edition you'll need because we're just doing iterative updates to it. There is no need for a 9th edition because we do all those iterations within 8th edition. It will be 8.1, 8.1.1 sort of thing. It will just go on forever. And they've done it a bit with... I know. They did it with 40K. They've done it with AOS. And what I like about it now, especially more so with AOS, is it feels like you're in a particular time frame within the game. Like we're playing the Thondia not necessarily a campaign, but we're playing the latest season, which is Thondia. That's got its own unique rules for playing in this season. If you want to go back to the previous one, you can do and play that one with that specific mission twists. And I sort of feel like 40K should have embraced that a bit more. So, this Grand Tournament pack, it's like, cool, all of the tanks get extra OC, for example, or there's a specific, warlord enhancements or warlord traits that you could take for your army to theme it to be in a particular time setting. And I sort of feel like 40K would actually really benefit from this, where it's like a constant ongoing narrative, which is what it now is, but there's never like specific time period. it's like we're in this nebulous, we're sort of playing within the Indomitus Crusade, but there's no definitive time within it. And we sort of got Prior Nexus last edition, because that was like the launch box, even though it was called Indomitus. And then this year it's clearly all Leviathan. And these sort of names should really be definitive time periods within the built in-world universe that you're playing. Yeah. And that was part of baked into the edition, basically.
Yeah, and it just focuses on like a core conflict. Like, I'd love that for like this edition if it was just, this is the Leviathan edition, and in this edition we're exploring, you know, the conflict between the Tyranids and, you know, the Space Marines, and then the knock-on effects that's having on the wider universe. So over the span of this edition, we will give you codexes that focus exclusively on stories from this moment. And yeah, okay, fine, we're going to rinse and repeat some of the, you know, faction lore. We're going to talk about, you know, how they manufacture Space Marines, how they do this, how they do that, the sort of origins of it. But the bulk of it is us exploring what is happening with this army in this moment, as it were, as opposed to just kind of doing what they did with Tyranids. And we don't know if they've done this with Space Marines yet, although we will have definitely talked about it in this episode, whether they're just reprinting old stuff and just going, just sort of phone that in. And I mean, because that was the other thing I wanted to talk about with this, and I know we talked about it already, and we probably have laboured it in the Space Marine section as well, but just to say as well, it is the weirdest thing to me, and apologies if I'm repeating myself, I so often do these days. It is the weirdest thing to me that we're in a situation now where Games Workshop are essentially happy with regurgitating verbatim literature words that they're already published in older editions. Like the fact that the rulebook has a lot of reprint, the fact that the Tyranid book has a lot of reprint, and the fact that the Space Marine book almost certainly will do the same. It's actually really quite concerning, because to me, it actually kind of speaks to a kind of wider problem at the moment, which is that I think that kind of lack of imagination, or that lack of willingness to kind of innovate within those spaces. Because here's the thing, right? In every other edition of 40k, when they gave us a codex, it took things forwards. And I know I bleat on about 5th edition being my favourite edition for a multitude of reasons, but I swear to God, man, one of the best things about 5th edition is the fact that it was probably one of the most innovative times in storytelling in 40k. Like, they made so many great leaps forwards, you know? Like, you got to think, right? In 5th edition, at the start of 5th edition, before you know, the team of God, I've forgotten the names, Jez Goodwin and is it Phil Kelly? Yeah, Phil Kelly. They got together and they redefined what Dark Elder were. Dark Elder before, or Drakari as they're known now, were kind of like the Slanishy, Webway Elder Pirate guys, but they hadn't fleshed them out. The Dark Elder book completely transformed our understanding of that faction and planted a lot of really amazing seeds. Blood Angels, you know, before the events of 5th edition, for better or worse, Blood Angels were Index Astarte Space Marines with a death company. During the events of 5th edition, they leaned into things like the Sanguinary Guard. They introduced the Sanguinor. They introduced, you know, a greater level of depth to that faction. Same thing with Grey Knights. Before 5th edition, Grey Knights were just part of the, you know, the Demon Hunters book, and they were essentially like a little add-on thing, but 5th edition turned them into a whole faction. Necrons before 5th edition were slaves to the Catan, whereas in the events of 5th edition, they actually became the enslavers themselves. They defeated the Catan and destroyed them and turned them into shards, and that's the narrative of those factions. And I could go on, right? Like, there's so many amazing, innovative things that happened in 5th in terms of narrative and storytelling and the way they kind of pushed it forwards. And I felt like that came out of this merger between the designers building the miniatures and the actual writers creating the worlds. And I think that was incredible. And that's the thing that sort of 8th edition at the start of it felt really exciting about, because we were seeing this new, you know, bringing forwards of the story. 9th edition kind of slowed it down a bit and sort of took us back to the beginnings of Indomitus. But 10th at the moment, I just don't really know what it's trying to tell me. It just sort of feels like, yeah, that again, which is just weird. It's like, oh, okay, cool. You're trying to tell me that you're taking the story forward. But I don't really feel like you are. I just feel like you're just kind of going back to your big hits from like 8th and 9th edition and just being like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there are probably, I don't know, like what, four
Sorry, everyone. Phil's having many a fun technical issue. So anyway, I was waxing lyrical about the narrative in 5th and how we're kind of retreading ground. Continue, Phil.
Yeah, so I guess there is new lore in the core rulebook about Leviathan book. I think it's like 4 to 6 pages. I've not read it yet, so that would be interesting to see, because that is literally the only 10th edition lore so far, although I guess there's technically some in the Tyranid Codex as well. But what's interesting is you're saying about how they did all this groundbreaking changes to armies in 5th edition. It's like, well, they can't really do that again. They can't reinvent Tyranids because the canon of 40k is now quite solidified. But I guess what they could do is, if they're going to copy and paste an entire codex of lore, it's like, spend that time that you've just saved giving us extra content in the codex in addition to what is normally in that codex. So don't use that time to just shave off, like, say, a month of work for that codex so you can churn out codexes quicker. No, put that extra month into, detailed descriptions and, what I said before, what I'd really love is unit types. Like, every page, have a couple of units on that page, give us like half a page worth of content describing what each unit does, or what each high fleet does, for example. Like, put that effort somewhere else into the book as a bonus, because it feels like the codexes are quite formulaic in terms of how they're presented nowadays. And yes, they added on the combat patrol. Yes, they added the painting guides in. Great. That's something Age of Sigmar's doing already. But there's a lot of stuff in the previous codexes that used to be there that aren't anymore, that they could probably add back in, or as you say, innovate with some new stuff. And I think, I can't remember if it was the Orc Codex you showed me last time after we spoke talking about this in the settings section. You were saying that there was like the Orc, was it like all the Orc wars that were like hand illustrated on a double page spread that looked really beautiful? And it's like, yeah, do some really kind of crazy wacky stuff in your codex and
that was
stick them in there.
Actually inside the description of the Orcs inside the 5th edition rulebook.
Oh, it was in the rulebook, wasn't it? Yeah.
But again, though, because like I'm telling you, man, like back then, there used to be obviously this creative, collaborative thing where these teams got together and they created things. I'm not saying you need to reinvent what Drakari are anymore, right? I'm not saying that's what you need. What I'm saying is like, come up with new characters, give me new versions or events within the worlds, flesh stuff out, make stuff interesting, like come up with things and like if it is Drakari, maybe there's a new Archon that's threatening Vet's dominion, and maybe it's creating a new, Cabal fleet within, the gangs of Komarov, and this individual is actually, someone who, unlike Vect, didn't come up from the streets, but is actually of like regal, a regal bloodline, and has been able to, leverage the new cult of the Incan and and all that stuff, and been able to leverage the newfound kind of ideologies to their advantage, and like build intrigue, create some fun stuff with that. I think the thing that I'm always finding at the moment is it just, I feel like it's just that lack of like risk taking with the way that they tell these stories and the way they build this stuff. And again, I think, it's that thing where it's almost like we kind of fixed everything around 6th edition narratively. So then we had to then start, they started having to look at like other factors. They went, we haven't done Mechanicus yet, get Mechanicus in there. We haven't done Knights yet, get Knights in there. And they expand those. And credit where credit's due, right? I give the Votan a lot of smack for their model range. I'm not loving it, although the more I see it, the more it kind of, weakens my resolve, as it were. But the point is that like the stuff they did with the Votan was really interesting. But even then, it kind of always sort of speaks of this system where I just get the feeling, and again, without wanting to continuously repeat myself, that Jez and his team come down from on high and go, we made this, make something up. And it's very much a case of like, it's not being, because again, they talk about this on various like podcasts and things back when they used to do those sorts of things. So they talk about their process, and it's like, we, the design studio, come up with the models, the rules writers and the lore people had to figure it out. You know, when we came to them with a whole new range of Space Marines, they had to figure it out. And what they came up with was Primaris Marines. Well done them. You know, but again, it's like these kind of collaborative creative processes would be great to see. And I think that's just all I'm saying is I think, like, for me personally, it just would have been cool if the NID book especially really laid out the actual kind of scope and scale of what's happening in a more detailed manner. And we actually got more than just kind of few throwaway paragraphs. And the whole thing became more about, you know, the whole kind of beginnings of Leviathan, creating that. Like, and again, also doing like crazy, fun, creative, innovative things. It's like, if you have decided as a rules writing team and as a design team that for this edition, it's the NID edition and it's all about their escalating threat level, why give us one traditional codex? Why not break down the NID codex into 3 books, one for every year of the game, and just be like, this is, you know, the tip of the tendril. This is below the waterline. This is what comes after. Like, the idea that over the course of the 3 years of that cycle, the NID threat level is increasing dramatically, and you're seeing more forms of tyrannage. You're seeing more threats revealed. You're seeing, you know, because they can do that, right? Of course they could. I mean, admittedly, it's a hell of a play, but it makes the whole thing more interesting.
Well, it turns what is effectively just a launch box tagline, Leviathan, with a bunch of new miniatures of Tyranids into more of a campaign for the edition, which would be quite interesting. And they could do a Leviathan campaign for the edition. Obviously, you got the Trannic War Crusade book, but that's not quite the same thing. Yeah, definitely would be something interesting to do. I do like the little Warzone bits that they do in all the codexes, because they do break down lots of different areas. And I think giving you scope to find characters that you can latch onto and identify with, or go, oh, this person sounds really cool. I want to theme an army around what this person's doing, and, you know, their army playstyle. You say, if it's a particular type of Drakari warlord or a particular type of High Fleet tendril that's slightly off kilter from, you know, the standard stuff. That narratively is really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And look, here's the thing. I'm sure not a million, we don't get that many listeners, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners who get frustrated with the lack of books that I read, although I do read a lot of them, although I listen to them mostly. Anyway, the point is what I'm saying is some of those guys might be like, oh yeah, but they did a story about that in a Black Library book, or they did a story like that. Because I admit, I haven't read everything in the Tyranid Codex yet in terms of the new High Fleet stuff. But what I'm saying is it just doesn't, if it is in there, it's not immediately obvious, and it's not something that they're leveraging. It's usually very obvious when Games Workshop are leveraging a particular plot device, because normally they go to town with it and they make a big song and dance for their marketing, and they put short stories up on Warhammer Community, and, you know, obviously all of the various spokespeople are, you know, bleating about the particular nuances of that narrative and why that narrative is exciting. So, you know, to me, I feel like I could be forgiven if I've not read that and it is delivering on some of that stuff, but it doesn't immediately feel like that. It doesn't, you know, seemingly become immediately accessible. But yeah, that's all I was sort of saying about it, because that's the thing with Sigmar. Like, I love the fact that in Sigmar they just go, for this edition, we're focusing on this. And it feels like a lot of the stuff is spoken about, and, you know, the exposition is delivered within that kind of, you know, within that kind of overarching theme. It's like, we are focusing on the realm of beasts. That is where we're at.
Yeah, so this edition's been Realm of Beasts. Every General's Handbook has been a different area in the Realm of Beasts. I think they've just done, I'm going to say 2, but they did Fondir as sort of
maybe that was a separate General's Handbook, or it was like a large format A4, so it might be a campaign supplement or something, because that was what had the incarnates in. Then they've done 2 of the smaller General's Handbooks, not GT books, but effectively GT book. And each of those has gone, okay, here's some specific general match play rules, theming it to a particular thing. This one's all about, ice, magic. Every mission's set in like a tundra, or there's ice geysers coming out from the ground.
So yeah, all of that nonsense to one side, not necessarily wanting to stay on the theme of classic Warhammer fun, but kind of while we're on the topic, did you see, Phil, that they released a classic battle report on Warhammer Community in celebration of 40 years of 40k, 30 years of the Space Marine Codex, or rather the Space Wolves Codex, of which the bat rep was taken from, and also they're recreating the battle report on Warhammer Plus, which neither of us have.
Yes, that's true. I did see it. I didn't download the mission to take a look at it, but it's cool that it's
not the mission, mate.
Kind of things.
They don't. It's the full bat rep from the Space Wolves Second Ed Codex.
Oh, is that what you're downloading?
Yeah. So if you download it, you get the old bat rep in all of its glory.
Oh, from White Dwarf. Okay.
No, from the Space Wolves Codex.
Oh, right. It's in Space.
Yeah. So in the second edition Space Wolf Codex, Jervis Johnson and Andy Chambers faced off against one another in a bat rep between orcs and Space Wolves, and it is gorgeous.
Oh, nice.
And obviously they've recreated it, which is nice to see. I've got to be honest. I don't know if you're anything like me, Phil, but I like to think you are. I can't imagine you weren't even a little bit inspired by the idea of being able to have your very own classic goblin green board. I mean, that's quite something to behold, isn't it?
Well, it's
with
true.
all of the beautiful retro terrain that they got built for it as well.
Ooh.
So they've got the piles of rocks, and they've got ruins and things. Although they're using the modern ruin kind of buildings, even though
have they got the spiky cactus?
They don't have the spiky cactus, at least not photographed. And in place of the demolished Dark Angels Predator, they've now got a demolished Dark Angels. I assume that's one of the gladiators. One of those variants of hover tank. But yeah, it's lovely to see, mate. The only slight break in immersion is the fact that the 2 armies that they've got battling on the tabletop in their recreation have got more modern basing upon them, so they haven't rebased them with goblin-y green, which is an ever so slightly frustrating thing to see. It's like if you're going to go to that extent and make the board, you may as well rebase all the minis.
I don't know. That's quite a lot of effort.
It is quite a lot of effort, but they made an entire board for it, Phil. I mean, at that point, in for a penny.
Well, I don't know. It feels like that would be, there is a terrain making department that could probably knock that out in a week, whereas rebasing what I assume is heavy metal miniatures, no, you can't do that.
No, they're not heavy metal though. They're just armies painted by members of the Warhammer Community / Warhammer Plus team, by all accounts.
Oh, right. Fair enough then.
But even then, right? Whatever the case, I think it's quite cool. I always like seeing them kind of doing these homages to the classics. It's fair to say within the online space, Retro Hammer it's quite the thing now, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of second ed stuff going around. In terms of 40k, lots of just retro or retrospectives on old Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy stuff. I've been enjoying. Shout out to Jordan Sorcery. He's been doing a lot of the old Warhammer Fantasy editions, talking about Mordheim, talking about loads of the old game systems that used to exist. Great little channel.
I could see you and Jordan Sorcery getting on famously.
touching each other's beards, no doubt, going, marvellous, marvellous beard. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's it. I think, in a way, you probably wish that I were Jordan Sorcerer and not me.
Yeah.
It would make for a very one-dimensional podcast, though. It would just be the two of you broadly agreeing on everything.
Oh, yeah, I think so. And talking about the good old times.
I mean, to be fair, that's what we've kind of devolved into now, really. It used to be
yes, but you're just 5th edition. You're just 5th edition. You're a one-note wonder, Dan.
It's the best edition, mate. I can't stress it enough. It's have I not presented many arguments for why it is the best edition of 40k?
Well, you have. It's fair enough. I was going to say the Warhammer Community website did also do a recreation of I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's the Attack on the Farm, which was the
that was a Rogue Trader one,
Rogue Trader one. But they actually gave you that as an updated mission, so you could actually play it in 10th Ed, which was cool.
Yeah. Well, you can't do that with this one. This is just
missed a trick there.
Well, indeed, it's just something they made for Warhammer Community / Warhammer Plus fun. Not enough to tempt me to join Warhammer Plus, I have to be honest with you, but nice to see all the same. They deserve a shout out whenever they do something good, and here it is for them. So well done there. I suppose other than that, in terms of the things I was going to sort of prattle on about in this particular moment, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that I have actually spent a good amount of time over the last week focusing in on and or learning one-page rules. I know it's very kind of it's very fashionable at the moment, it seems, to talk about one-page rules. So much so that all of the people
if no one knew what it was, Dan, how would you describe it? Hold on, I'll do an impression of you. What is one-page rules, Dan? I've never heard of this.
Well, Phil, thank you for asking. One-page rules is basically, at least from the outset, a bit of a rip-off in some regards, in so much as it is a rule set that has predicated itself on the notion that 40k, as created by Games Workshop, is a bit of a faff. So they went nuts to this. We're going to make a, air quotation mark, better version, or at least a different version that's a bit easier. But we are going to elect to create a system where you can basically take all of your 40k miniatures created by Games Workshop and play them in a game system that isn't Games Workshop's. To be honest with you, I always struggle with where I stand with that, because obviously overall I'm a massive advocate for supporting the hobby and supporting what it is that you kind of love at the end of the day, right? Like, I'm a big fan of Warhammer and Warhammer related things, and as a result I extensively support that business financially with multiple purchases of all sorts of things. And I'm very happy to give them that support. And I definitely won't stop playing Warhammer 40,000 10th edition, and I definitely won't stop playing Age of Sigmar. But I can't lie, I'm just interested in what else is out there at the minute. I think, at the end of the day, I think one of the crazy things about 10th edition is, and I think we've kind of gotten to a place now where our sort of stance on it as an edition is relatively well documented, which is that, at least from my perspective anyway, I neither love it nor hate it, right? It's not my favorite edition. I think we all know what edition that is, or if we didn't, we'd certainly do by the end of this segment. But my point is like, it's not my favorite edition. It might, in some regards, be one of the weakest editions, or at least it feels that way from the outset. But still 40k, I still love it, I still enjoy it, happy days. But there is a pull because of that potential softness at launch and the shifting rules. And I'll be honest with you, the main grumble I have with 10th edition more than anything is the loss of Force Org and the sheer volume of miniatures you can potentially get in armies. I really don't understand why the 40k team have decided to use points as the main balancing mechanic. And their solution is more often reduce the points of armies rather than increase the points of the good stuff, or at least it feels that way. It's like, oh, Votan aren't very strong, make them really cheap. Give them a few extra rules as well, but ultimately make them really cheap. And now you end up in a situation where a lot of Votan players are like, good Lord, I've got to buy so many more Votan to be able to field a 2,000 point army. And I think that's really one of the things that like sticks in my crawl a bit more than other things. It's just the sheer volume of stuff you need to play 40k now is quite extensive, whereas one-page rules is much less that. But yeah, look, to answer your question, one-page rules is essentially intended to be an easy game system that you can play with any miniatures, but it is very compatible with Games Workshop range miniatures. And it is a really basic rule set, Phil. So basically, broad strokes, every character or every unit in the game has two stat lines. You have quality and you have toughness, I believe is what it's called, or not toughness, saving throws. You have armor and you have quality, or you have defense. That's it. Quality and defense. That's what it is. So basically, if you want to do something and be successful at it, you have to roll equal to or over your quality. And if you are being attacked by something, you need to roll equal to or over your defense. And that's it. And then everything else is just basically you go, I go, or I go, you go. And you can do one of four things. You can either stand still, which has certain benefits, might improve shooting, for example. You can move and shoot. You can run, or you can charge. And if you charge, you fight. Your opponent then has the option, should they be alive after being charged, to fight back. And then you resolve that combat, and the charging player moves their miniatures 3 inches away from the combat. So if the thing that you charged into was alive by the end of it and they didn't run away, you then disengage with them. And then your opponent now has the opportunity to do something in response. It's a very simple system. Got a bunch of very simple rules, very quick to play, seems like a lot of fun. I haven't been able to play it myself just yet, but I've read it extensively. I think it's a good system, man. I mean, I was put onto it by Uncle Adam. Is that his name, Uncle Adam?
Yeah, Tabletop Minions, I want to say.
Tabletop Minions, yes. So he talked about it, but it wasn't just him. There were a bunch of different channels talking about it, because basically they did like a new 3rd edition of one-page rules. I jumped onto their Patreon, I chucked them a couple of quid, and now I've got access to all the rule books, and I've just been reading those extensively. They've got a really good army building tool. But like I was saying, the thing that's really compelling is you can chuck an army together super easily with the army building tool that they've got online, but the lists are just blissfully small. Like, I wrote a 1,000-point Custodes list, and it's 5 models. It's like 3 Custode Guard, 1 Custodes Shield Captain, and 1 Dreadnought, all with different names, admittedly, but that's 1,000 points. So, a 2K Custodes list might be like 15 miniatures. I can get behind that. That's great. Whereas like, and even Space Marine, these things, I think that's just, I don't know, it just seems better to me. Like,
it feels like it's suitably elite for Custodes, which is what you want them to be. You literally do just want a handful of minis, but for them to be blisteringly good.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because like they have a quality check of 3+ and a defensive roll of 2+. So they're super durable, and they're defensive roll 2+, and they're all like tough 3, which basically means they've got what we would consider wounds of 3. Which is rare, because most things in one-page rules have 1 wound. Movement is 6 inches, unless you're fast, in which case it's like 12 inches. And that's it, really. It's super basic. But the game is quite enriching and interesting, because although the systems are basic, the game feels that it's not balanced, because I don't think miniature wargaming can ever truly be balanced, but it feels more representative of what is good and what isn't good on the tabletop. And to put it in context, if you take a unit of Terminators with close combat weapons, they're like 250 or 225 points with close combat weapons, so like their equivalent of Lightning Claws. You put a Storm Bolter and a Power Fist on them, the unit goes up to like 350 points, because in that game, shooting is better than not shooting, because obviously you've got range and you've got advantages to that. So the points reflect that. It's like, well, yeah, of course a thing with a gun is more valuable than a thing with a sword because it can do more on the tabletop. Whereas I always feel like with like 40k point systems, it just feels like they dodge that entirely, which is weird because in Age of Sigmar they do the same thing. It's like the strength of this unit is it has a gun or it has a missile weapon in Age of Sigmar. So the points kind of reflect that. And a lot of the units that have missile weapons in Age of Sigmar, blow away like, leaves when you actually get into them. You just literally, most things with missile weapons in Age of Sigmar, the minute you touch them, they die. Even some of the Stormcast Eternal stuff isn't that durable, even though it's got like missile weapons and stuff. But you're paying the points for the ability to do damage at a distance. But it always feels like with 40k, they just sort of go, well, yeah, it's 40k. Of course, everything's got guns.
I think that's it. The baseline is.
Again, sorry for the technical faults, everybody. Hopefully it's not too offensive to your ears when that stuff kicks off. Hopefully I will have edited it right. But anyway, Phil, you were about to retort.
Basically, I've lost my train of thought there, sorry.
We were talking about ranged weapons and the idea that in 40k, they don't really ever reflect that in points. So you end up in a situation that like Tau are dirt cheap, but they can basically just blow you off the table.
I've got my point now. It's basically that 40k, the baseline is everyone has guns, and the exception is people are good in combat and have combat weapons. That's almost, you pay a premium for also being good in combat because you've always got a gun. It's almost then a rare sort of almost handicap to not have a gun but just have combat weapons. Whereas, as you say, Age of Sigmar, everyone's got a combat weapon. No one really is that good into shooting. So the ones that do have guns, you pay the premium for the gun. Whereas, as you say, it's the other way around in 40k. Even though sometimes, if you didn't have a gun but you had a close combat weapon, you're not as efficient because you can't do everything in every phase of the game, so to speak.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, in AOS, you've got things like Cadron Overlords who, those guys actually are very strong because of the sheer volume of movement combined with range weapons they have. And it's an interesting illustration of like those mechanics and how they kind of warp the way gameplay works. It's like if you're playing a game where you introduce an army that is mobile and shooty, it's innately quite strong. And obviously the way they try and deal with that in AOS is in obviously giving like certain points premiums on them and then ultimately, reducing their efficiency in defensive capabilities. Although Cadron Overlords are a weird archetype because they're quite defensive as well, because they are still dwarves in armor, so they are quite durable and they are strangely mobile, so they kind of exploit a lot of really good mechanics. And I think that's always interesting as well, I suppose, of the Games Workshop games, is they always end up in a scenario where mobility is so like massive in the game. Like being quick is probably one of the greatest stats you can have, whereas they never seem to kind of cotton onto that or reflect that meaningfully in their pointing. It always feels like quick movement has always been associated with frailty. But the way the game works, it's like, especially with 5 turns, there's only so much damage you can deal, and there is that kind of trading element to it. But anyway, in one-page rules, here's the thing. Like, I haven't played it yet. Me and Phil were talking about playing it, although we're also talking about playing old editions and doing all the rest of it. But yeah, I've spent a bunch of time reading it. I'm actually quite excited about it. I think it's actually making me quite intrigued by the notion of painting and putting together some different Space Marine forces, for example. In fact, I was writing some army lists for my Craftworld Elder, which is a faction that I've really not had much of a desire to play in recent years, even though they're kind of like still broadly what I guess you'd call my army, even though I've not meaningfully played them in years. But it is interesting because I sort of look at it and go, I could totally put an army together for one-page rules that seems reasonable. And you actually get excited about the project because they don't feel unobtainable. I think that's where I'm struggling as well with like new 40k projects, because I'm like, right, okay, so I need to paint how many of this thing? It's like, it's bananas. Like, I put together a 2,000 point Elder army themed around Court of the Young King, and the intent was that it was going to be an army based on 2nd edition Rogue Trader minis, so all the old Phoenix Lord sculpts, which I own, and all the old Aspect Warriors in their biggest unit size. So that was basically as an army, right? It's an avatar, the 6 Phoenix Lords. I won't name them all because most of you don't know their names. I do. I'm just... Don't make me prove it. All right, I'll do it. There's Baroff, there's Karandras, there's Fugan, there's Morgan Ra, there is Jane Zar, and there's a Sermon. There you go. Look at me. I know names. Anyway, the point is there's their 6, and then they've got their units. So Sermon has his Dire Avengers, Morgan Ra has his Dark Reapers, Fugan has his Fire Dragons, Karandras has his Scorpions, Jane Zar has her Banshees, and Baroff has his Swooping Hawks, right? So you have all of them. So you basically have 60 different Aspect Warrior models, 6 Phoenix Lords, and an Avatar. And that's 2,000 points. That's 6 epic heroes, of which in other editions of 40k might have cost you like 200 points each. So like in old editions, you couldn't even have fielded 5 of these guys because it would have cost you 1,000 points just for like 5 of them. Whereas now you can field all 6 of them, an Avatar, and 10 of each of their aspects in a squad. And it's like...
It feels like they pointed it specifically so you could do this army.
Well, maybe. I mean, in terms of points, it comes in at a cool, 1980 or something. Like, it's pretty much, so you still have, technically 20 points to spend on something if you could. But what I'm saying is, it's pretty mad, isn't it, to think that, because you go back to, older editions, even, 9th edition, it was, I don't know, someone like a Sermon in 9th edition was, 185 points or whatever he was. And, I'm saying, it just sort of feels like a lot of the time with the points in 10th, it's it's too much, man. The idea of me being able to field 67 miniatures, 7 of which being super elite characters. And bear in mind, a big part of the army is the Avatar. The Avatar's a massive point sink. The Avatar's 300 odd points. So if I didn't have the Avatar, I could still probably get even more in. I could have got another 4 units of Dire Avengers, and I could have hundreds of them without the Avatar. So it's a bit balmy. You sort of look at it and go, good Lord.
Well, it sounds like a guard army, and I have been feeling like that even for even last edition. It felt like a lot of armies have as many models as what a guard army should have. But they still tend to be better in other ways as well.
Oh, yeah. But that's all I'm saying, right? And that's the thing about one-page rules that seem quite compelling, because, again, I wrote 1,000 points of Craftworld Elder in one-page rules, and it was you get an Altark, put in 1 unit of Guardian Defenders, I get a Wraith Lord, and I'm done. There's 1,000 points. So I could do that. It's easy. And then 2,000 points, it's add a tank, add a few other little bits. You go, cool, that's 30-ish models all told. Easy peasy. I get excited about that.
I guess that's similar to Combat Patrol, though. You could just buy a box, and that's got maybe 15, 20 models in.
Yeah.
And that's a small little army for you to play. Sounds like that was probably even more than what you get in one-page rules. And there is something to be said for just having very small armies that are, one, easy to play, but also easy to collect. Because
I agree.
And not just in a way because of the size of the models, but ideally because the sculpts aren't, too crazy for you to build and put together, and the amount of detail on them in terms of painting them and stuff. So the more you can put on the table, I'd like to say the more you'll buy, but I feel like all it actually means is you're buying the same amount, but your pile of shame or pile of potential, whatever you want to call it, is diminishing because you're actually getting through it and you're not having as much of a backlog. And ultimately that's better for you, probably better for your mental health, because you don't feel like you've got this big backlog of chores to build and paint through. And instead it's cool, I've actually built this and I can play it and I'm having a game on the tabletop. Isn't this fun?
Yeah. I'm just a bit intimidated by like 10th edition armies, right? Like it's been easy because I've been playing knights most of this edition. This weekend on Saturday, I'm playing in a 1-day RTT in Pool again as part of 40k Brawl, and I'm running a Dark Angel army, and that Dark Angel army is 33 Terminators and the Lion. And me and Joe were talking about this, and we were like, I was going, I'm just not sure what to do. He goes, mate, just take something fun. He's like, you got loads of Terminators, right? And I was like, yeah, I got loads of Dark Angel Terminators. It's just like, and you got the Horus Heresy, the Lion mini, right? And I was like, well, yeah, I haven't got the new 40k one. He goes, who cares? It's the Lion, innit? I was like, yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, it definitely is. And he goes, yeah, and you put it on the scenic base, same size as the 40k mini. So, yeah, no, you got a good point. He goes, just run that. Just bring all your Terminators and the Lion. That'd be fun, won't it? And I was like, yeah, all right. Good plan. I'm going to do that.
Nice. I wonder what the scale of the old line is from Forge World versus the new Games Workshop one. Like, has he grown?
He has grown, but obviously on his scenic base, he's a little elevated. So the footprint, as per the side-by-sides I've seen, are pretty similar.
That's good.
But the actual Lion is smaller, but the overall sort of size of him on the base or the base is pretty much there. Your computer is beginning to do what it did last time, but it's not broken yet.
Okay.
I think we may as well use this as the opportunity to say goodbye, because this is all gone wrong, everybody. We're going to go away and fix this so as the rest of this episode is not a horrific mess. But the outro was, we tried our very best. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much. Phil, closing thoughts?
Sorry, everyone, for my microphone problems.
It's all right. They will forgive you, but they shan't forget. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Coming at you. I'm addicted to stress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long and I hang around like a bum. I think I'm going nowhere and that makes me nervous. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me. It's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. It's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. I'm trying to cut down on my caffeine consumption, so when I get up, I just have one cup of coffee, and I like to have another cup of coffee with my breakfast. And on the way to work, I like to get a cup of coffee, like the kind of cup of coffee that you get with the donuts. If I never get the donut, I just have the cup of coffee. And when I get to work, I like to have a cup of coffee, because I like to have coffee when I'm talking on the phone. It usually goes cold, and I need to get another cup of coffee, and it's lunch, and I have an espresso. Back, it's not morning anymore, so I have a Diet Cola and another Diet Cola. But then I'm feeling fine, and I'm feeling pretty sharp, and I'm feeling pretty wired, and I'm getting things done. But right about 2, I get this little tiny migraine. It starts by my eyes, and it moves to the back of my neck, and it moves to the bottom of my spine. But it doesn't get there till 5 or 6 o'clock, which is the end of the day. So I'm fine, so I'm fine, so I'm fine, so I'm fine, so I'm fine. Except when I have to work late, which I usually do. Addicted to stress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long, and I hang around like a bum, and I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me. Hey, how you doing? Looking good. You been working out? Yeah, I can tell. Alright, see you later. I love to work, I love to run, I love to play real hard. I love to steal little things from the grocery store, like a piece of bubble gum, or sometimes I just stick my thumb in a peach and leave it there. I love to work, I love to run, I love to water ski, snowboard, jet ski, skydive, parasail, hang glide, rollerblade, mountain bike, bungee jump. Well, I mean, I'd love to do these things if I ever had the time. I love to work, I love to work, I love to work out after work. I love to spend a little time with this woman I'm seeing, except we never really get all the time to spend together, so we call each other up and we talk about work. But what I think I really love is to get up on myself on a little tiny island in the middle of the ocean with just me and a book and a cellular phone and a personal computer in case something came up. And I'd eat, and I'd drink, and I'd run, and I'd sleep, and I wouldn't do nothing except swim all day. So, my beaver doesn't work underwater. Where were the sharks? Where were the sharks? Where were the sharks? And there's this kind of anemone that sticks in your foot, and the poison goes up to your brain, and you die. And sand fleas, yeah. But actually, I think it'd be really relaxing. Just me by myself in the middle of the ocean, and that's what I really love to do more than anything else, except I probably hate it. Weak and distressed, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long, and I hang around like a bomb. I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody